Chapter 1160. Although he was ambitious, when he thought of the current lineup under the Lord's tent, even Wei Ci could not help but gasp. Why? He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to get a place. In his previous life, His Majesty had specially built the Golden Scale Pavilion to commend the meritorious officials. 10 civil and military officials were to be selected. At first, it was decided that they would take 9 people each. This was because the number of people in the world started with 1 and ended with 9. The number 10 was not auspicious. However, His Majesty was stubborn and stubbornly insisted on choosing 10 people, implying that everything was perfect. The other officials' objections were ineffective. Not to mention others, Su Ku, Feng Jin, and Sun Wen, the 3 of them died in a strange way in his previous life and had no fate with the Golden Scale Pavilion. It was different now. As long as they could survive until the world was settled, would the Golden Scale Pavilion be without them? The number of places on the list of civil officials had been reduced by 3. Thinking about the strategists who had successively submitted to the Lord in the previous life, Wei Ci could not help but feel nervous. Why call it the Golden Scale Pavilion? Just call it the investiture of the gods. Wei Ci sat at the bow of the boat, enjoying the golden sunlight and the fresh river breeze. He dug out the old almanac from the depths of his memory. Since there were ranks, there would naturally be a first and a second. But who would be the champion of civil and military affairs? The officials argued until their faces turned red. The commoners and the aristocratic families were at a stalemate. Although His Majesty had taken advantage of the chaotic times to beat the aristocratic families to the point that they did not dare to show their faces, the establishment of the Jiang dynasty was in urgent need of manpower. The aristocratic families were full of talents, and this was a good opportunity for them to take advantage of the situation. The civil and martial arts ranking list of the Golden Scale Pavilion had become the stage for them to compete against each other. The poor and the aristocratic families did not give way to each other, and the poor were slowly rising. If the second and third generation could stabilize their footsteps, sooner or later they would be able to enter the ranks of the noble families, and even become a new aristocratic family. Most of the important officials in the imperial court came from poor families, so the aristocratic families couldn't do anything to them. They could only pinch their noses and take a step back to prevent both sides from suffering. After all, His Majesty was above their heads. There were a total of 10 spots in the civil and martial roll. The 2 factions would split it equally. How about this? After dividing the places, they began to fight for the first place in the civil and martial roll. Feng Ju would definitely be the first among the civil officials, right? He had followed Her Majesty since she was still a bandit. Without Feng Ju's years of planning, Her Majesty's unification of the world would have been full of twists and turns. Yang Tao was definitely the number 1 general, right? His overall strength was very strong, and his prestige in the military was very high. It didn't seem wrong for him to take first place. Wei Ci had no objections to being the top civil official candidate, but the candidate for the top military general was really a scam. Did the aristocratic families think that the bonfire under Yang Tao's but wasn't strong enough and wanted to add another match? Yang Tao's identity was sensitive, and his martial arts were not top-notch. If he tried to compete for the number 1 general, he would be courting death. The aristocratic families didn't care about this. They couldn't accept being suppressed by the poor. The result? His Majesty had been sitting calmly on the fishing platform, indifferently watching their war of words. When the civil and military ranks were listed, the 2 sects were dumbfounded. They had been arguing for so long, but His Majesty had not taken their words seriously at all. The first civil official was not the popular candidate, Feng Ju. Instead, it was Qiguan Rang, who came from a humble background and kept a low profile. Feng Ju was the second. This was something that even Wei Ci had not expected. If he remembered correctly, he clearly remembered that His Majesty had placed Feng Ju's portrait first. The number 1 general was Fu Wang, a fellow who was criticized by the outside world for having the ambition of a wolf. His birth was extremely low. 60% of the people from poor families were from poor families. It was an overwhelming victory. However, the poor did not have the last laugh. In addition to the civil and military roles, His Majesty had also set up the heavenly works role. Unlike the aristocratic families or poor families that relied on their families to form a group or were about to form a group, the heavenly works role was only for individuals. Regardless of man or woman, poor or young, as long as they could invent things that benefited the people, the national defense, and the country, they would contribute to the nation and benefit the world, they would all be on the roll. The country would come forward to promote their skills and would even give a portion of the profits to the individual. Although it was only a portion, the profits were enough to make all the merchants in the world jealous. The first bastard to be on the heavenly works roll had even taken a spot on the martial roll. He could be said to be a real winner in life. Wei Si's trip to Nanxing this time was not only to persuade Yang Tao to form an alliance, but he also wanted to take that bastard away. This person was none other than the treasure that Wei Si had found in his previous life, Bai Ning. He didn't believe that he wouldn't be able to coax that fellow to join in Shui's camp in his previous life. In this life, he wouldn't be able to do the same. Wei Si carefully checked his memory and found that there was nothing missing. Only then did he relax and lean against the bough to take a nap. Perhaps it was because what he thought about during the day, Wei Si kept muttering before he fell asleep. In his dreams, he also remembered the content that he had not dug out. In his dreams, Wei Si came to congratulate Bai Ning and congratulated him for making 2 rolls. However, the other party twirled his white beard. There was no joy on his face. Instead, he looked depressed. Sigh, Zixiao. Among the visitors who came today, you are the only one who feels the most comfortable. It's just to congratulate you, nothing else. The other party looked at the fish pond under the corridor and said gloomily, I was born in a poor family. Naturally, I also want to compete with the aristocratic families in the court and fight for a way out for the vast number of scholars from poor families, but the person above us is really frightening. If it wasn't for His Majesty not allowing it, I really want to retire so that I don't have to be a rat in a bellows and be bullied by both sides. As a popular person, he had received olive branches from both factions. However, Bai Ning, who knew the inside story, did not want to get involved. Hence, he was worried. What do you mean? The other party asked mysteriously, how do you think I got on the heavenly craftsman roll? Wei Si said, naturally, it's because I offered the secret recipe for gunpowder and firearms, strengthened the national defense, and contributed to the country. The other party chuckled and shook his head continuously. No. It's just because His Majesty likes me. Maybe it's because of you. Wei Si was about to ask in detail when Bai Ning said earnestly, when the poor and the aristocratic families fight, both sides will suffer. No matter how they fight, can they escape from His Majesty's palm? To put it bluntly, even if His Majesty is a distinguished guest, as long as the royal bloodline is still there and the heavenly craftsman role is still there, both factions are just toys in the palm of the Emperor's hand. Zixiao, don't get involved. Wei Si smiled bitterly, I'm just a small figure. How can I get involved in the battle between the gods? He had completely lost hope after the meteorite that fell from the sky a while ago. Well, if you think so, I have nothing to say. Bai Ning seemed to think of something and said, previously, you supported the Wei family. The Wei family used the tiger's skin to flaunt their strength and offended many people intentionally or unintentionally. Now that the situation is tense, the aristocratic families don't dare to go too far. You took the opportunity to lie low, which can be considered a good strategy for self-protection. Once the 3 roles of civil, martial, and heavenly craftsman are out, the mad dogs that bit you previously stopped. Then, Bai Ning rambled on and on. Wei Si listened carelessly at that time, drinking cup after cup of sake into his stomach. He could not remember what Bai Ning said, but it was very clear in the dream. Her Majesty can put whoever she wants on the heavenly crafts ranking. She'll throw you a prescription and let you take advantage of it for free and put on a show with her. With a whoosh, you'll be able to enter the imperial court even though you're just a commoner. This speed is even faster than ascension. To put it bluntly, the aristocratic families and the poor fight back and forth for the sake of benefits. The accumulation of generations is not as good as the rewards from His Majesty. Sigh, the more I think about it, the more I feel that the water is too deep. It's better to go back to my hometown and continue to sell firecrackers. What's the use of fighting between the poor and aristocratic families, Zixiao, don't you think so? The aristocratic families referred to noble families that had been officials for generations. In the era when the dissemination of books and education was difficult, they occupied a lot of resources. After generations of accumulation, they educated countless talents. The educated talents could also consolidate the family's interests, accumulate more resources, and make the entire interest group indestructible. In the end, the success of the aristocratic families lay in their rich capital, which allowed them to stand higher than others. If life was a competition, the poor were born at the starting point, while the aristocratic families were born at the halfway point or even the end. But, no matter how many resources the aristocratic families controlled, no matter how rich their heritage was, they were still limited by the development of the times. While everyone fought with cold weapons and on horseback, His Majesty could take out the recipe for gunpowder and more and give it to any trusted confidant. A small recipe, coupled with His Majesty's secret support, could instantly give birth to another rising force, disrupting the rhythm of the poor and aristocratic families. If they could not keep up with the pace of the times, regardless of whether they were aristocratic or poor, they would eventually be abandoned by the times. It was like flying a kite. The person who controlled the reel was His Majesty. How high and how far the kite flew was all in her control. Bai Ning always thought that His Majesty would go overboard, but it turned out that the people who went overboard were the aristocratic families and poor families. They were led by the nose and did not know it. Wei Ci clearly realized that he was dreaming, and the content was a memory deep in his mind. He remembered clearly that he visited Bai Ning that day, but he was depressed and unable to calm down. He also wanted to enter the civil officials list, but it was a delusion. When Bai Ning took out good wine to entertain him, Wei Ci drank a lot out of depression and did not understand what Bai Ning said. But now he dreamed of it. In the dream, he was muddle-headed, but he heard it clearly. Like a sudden clap of thunder, the scattered clues gradually pieced together. His Majesty, Wei Ci was shocked and suddenly opened his eyes. The dazzling sunlight hurt his eyes. He subconsciously turned his head to avoid it, and it took him a long time to adapt. When he regained consciousness, Wei Ci realized that he was breaking out in a cold sweat. Everything in the dream became clearer. He thought he understood His Majesty very well, understood the current lord very well, but when he thought back to the dream, Wei Ci found it hard to believe that what he understood might only be the tip of the iceberg. In the previous life, His Majesty had already started to plot. She was playing a very, very big game of chess, but he had no idea. At the same time, Jiang Pengji opened her eyes and withdrew her mental strength from the yin and yang jade pendant in time. She supported her chin with her left hand and twirled the brush with her right. She muttered, "Bai Ning? Which little demon is this?" Just as she was thinking, a messenger came from outside the tent. "Report, an urgent secret report from the front lines. Come in." Jiang Pengji restrained her unnecessary thoughts. The messenger hurriedly entered the tent and handed over a sealed bamboo tube. She casually pinched the bamboo tube and broke it, taking out the secret letter inside. Wei Ci had gone to Nanxing on a business trip, but Su Bei would not stop fighting because of this. Regardless of whether it was Su Bei or her, both sides were on the brink of life and death. The two families did not erupt into a large-scale war, only small skirmishes. For example, when they attacked a small district, you retreated and I advanced, I retreated and you advanced. Gentle was like flirting. Jiang Pengji knew what Su Bei was waiting for. He was waiting for Huang Song to send troops. She was also waiting for Wei Ci's news, waiting for Huang Song to enter the fray. If she did not press Huang Song and Su Bei to the ground and rub against them, she would feel sorry for Zixiao's hard work these few days. Sigh, they've become thinner and darker. Staring at Huang Song's secret letter, Jiang Pengji sighed. Chapter 1161. It's my honor to run errands for my lord. It's not hard at all. The messenger was overjoyed. He spoke his mind honestly. This time, it was Jiang Pengji's turn to be confused. What did he mean? Before Jiang Pengji said anything, the audience in the streaming room reacted first. Demon King Yan Lin, ha ha ha, this messenger boy is a little cute. Streamer, do a good deed and don't shatter his sweet dreams. Zi Xiao Xiao, let this beautiful misunderstanding continue. It's a pity to shatter it. Yao Ying Yun, poor boy. Xianyuan Mingjing, the messenger boy's mental state at this moment should be like this. Why does my lord suddenly care about me? Could it be that she's secretly in love with me because of my good looks? But I still want to build a career and protect my descendants. If my lord takes a fancy to me, won't I marry into her family? What should I do? What should I do? Shouldn't I express that I'm a little tight? Shenjia, wrong. The young boy's mental state at this moment should be like this. Come on, my lord, don't pity this delicate flower. A group of toxic onlookers gathered together and created hilarious jokes all the time. Even if Jiang Pengji was mentally strong, she had to admit that they were talented. Streamer V, Chenduxiu, do you want me to buy you 2 bottles of Dihuaxiu, plant a few orange trees, and build a few train stations? Although Jiang Pengji and the idol viewers lived in a different era by thousands of years, she was someone who kept up with the trends. She could learn and apply the jokes and memes that the audience created on the screen after a little pondering. She knew all about the Italian canon of the 2nd Battalion commander, Chenduxiu and Li Dazhao, Dihuaxiu hand sanitizer, god of creation, train stations, and orange trees. But Jiang Pengji still underestimated the shamelessness of the idol. As soon as she spoke, the screen was filled with bullet screens of yes, 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 and front row, screenshot and photo with the streamer. It was spectacular. Jiang Pengji was not a streamer who liked to interact with the audience. She had only spoken a few times in the streaming room for so many years. There were busybodies on the internet who collected her speeches over the years and edited them into a book and published it. She couldn't imagine what kind of immoral things these salted fish wouldn't do. After going through thousands of thoughts in her mind, Jiang Pengji put away the secret letter with her usual expression. She said to the messenger with a gentle expression, secret military reports can determine the outcome of a battle. You have fulfilled your duty and delivered the news to both places in time. You have done a good job and deserve praise. The messenger could no longer maintain his calm expression, and he thanked him happily. For many soldiers, if they could get a word of praise from their lord, it was far more joyous than being promoted or rewarded. His lord had said that he had become darker and thinner. It was obvious that she had paid attention to him and remembered him. It was as if he was stepping on cotton, and he floated away happily. Jiang Pengji laughed involuntarily. Her originally heavy mood brightened up with this little episode. Her mood brightened, but Huang Song and Su Bei were not so happy. Su Bei had thought that he could use the mother and son of the prostitute to turn the tables on Jiang Pengji. At the very least, he could cripple Yang Si. Among the people in Jiang Pengji's tent, only Yang Si was most familiar with Shanghai and Zhe counties. If Yang Si was crippled, the pressure on Su Bei's side would be greatly alleviated. Unexpectedly, the secret weapon that Huang Song had sent did not achieve the desired effect. Yang Si had nothing to do with the prostitute, and he was also not the father of the boy. He was not cuckolded. Under such circumstances, he still tried to accuse Yang Si and forcefully blackmail him. That was too shameless, and it went against the way of a gentleman. Not only did he not achieve his expectations, but he also had a bellyful of anger. Naturally, Su Bei had to find an outlet to vent his anger. Needless to say, the mother and son were directly dealt with. As if this was not enough to vent his anger, Su Bei still wanted to demand an explanation from Huang Song. What secret weapon to deal with Yang Si? He had made a fool of himself in front of Yang Si. Su Bei scolded Huang Song. Although the content of the letter was worded elegantly, the hidden bitterness that assaulted one's face made one's teeth ache. TSK, TSK, TSK. She was exactly like a resentful wife who had not seen her husband for a year and a half. Qing Jing and the rest understood the cause and effect of the matter. They all frowned. Wenbin is working for Su Bei. How could he watch Su Bei do such a foolish thing? Regardless of whether the mother and son were real or not, only by revealing it at the critical moment could it achieve a fatal effect and not give Yang Si a chance to retaliate. What was the use of impatiently playing this card now? Instead, it gave Yang Si time to react. In fact, Yang Si had cleanly brushed it off with a few words. The most important thing was, Yang Jingrong appears to be a person who does not reveal the mountain and does not reveal the water. In fact, he is meticulous and has the ability to see through the smallest details. The alliance between the two families is a secret. However, with Su Bei's actions, how could Yang Jingrong not guess the truth? I'm afraid that Lu Shi's side has already made sufficient preparations. If the enemy was prepared, how could a sneak attack achieve the desired effect? It was not without reason that Qing Jing said that Su Bei was too stupid. He had obtained a trump card and could not wait to show it off in front of the enemy. If this was not stupid, then what was? Qing Jing and Han Yu were from the same sect and knew each other very well. He did not believe that Han Yu could not see the trick behind it. Feng Ju frowned slightly. He had to admit that Qing Jing's words were reasonable. Although Su Bei has some flaws, with the current situation, it's better to have another ally than to fight alone. Once Su Bei fell, the next one to be beaten would definitely be Huang Song. Who asked Huang Song's territory to be next to Jiang Pengji's? Normal people could not stand their neighbors coveting them with a knife, let alone a feudal lord. If Su Bei was slightly stronger, Huang Song could wait for him and Jiang Pengji to fight until both sides were injured and then reap the benefits. However, they had overestimated Su Bei. Under such circumstances, only the Huang and Su families working together could create the safest situation. Only by getting rid of the most threatening enemy could the two families be at ease and slowly tear each other apart. At the same time, Wei Xi arrived at his destination. The current Yang Tao was no longer a nobody watching the big shots fight for the world. He had also grown into a colossus in the eyes of others. His influence in Dongqing only covered half of Zhangzhou, but his territory in Nanxing included 1 province and 4 counties. Although it was not the richest and most populous place in Nanxing, it was enough for him to gain a foothold. In order to gain a foothold, Yang Tao even formed an alliance with Enchui to advance and retreat together. The situation in Nanxing was far more chaotic than in Dongqing. Not only were there internal strife between the feudal lords and aristocratic families, but there was also the plundering and invasion of the 4 factions of Nanman. Wei Xi found out about the situation and sighed in disappointment. The Nanxing in front of him was both familiar and unfamiliar. As he asked someone to hand over the documents, he packed lightly and brought only a few guards with him. He prepared some meager gifts and went to look for Bai Ning. Bai Ning came from a humble background. His ancestors made firecrackers, so he had some assets. However, due to several generations of poor management, Bai Ning's business was on the verge of bankruptcy. Troubled times came again, and the 4 factions of Nanman led their troops to wreak havoc on the people and land of Nanxing. Bai Ning simply abandoned his family business and picked up weapons. He led the able-bodied men in the village to become volunteers and protect the old and young in the village. Bai Ning's business was not doing well, but he had a reputation as a chivalrous man. Wei Xi did not know if Bai Ning had been recruited by other forces, so he could only try his luck. As soon as he arrived in Pingjun, Wei Xi knew that this trip might be fruitful. Chapter 1162. We've already eaten and drunk. Old man, you should get to work. Bai Ning was shirtless with his trousers rolled up. He grabbed a handful of fodder and stuffed it into the mule's mouth. The mule turned its face away in disgust. The weather was hot, and the air was filled with impatience. Bai Ning was not a patient person. He tried to persuade the mule, but the mule still refused to carry its food. His temper flared up. "You beast, could it be that you want to be skinned and your bones pulled out to be roasted as donkey meat?" Bai Ning threatened the mule. The mule was still indifferent. He rolled his eyes and snorted coldly. He twisted his body and pointed his butt at Bai Ning. Bai Ning was about to get angry when Wei Xi stepped forward with a smile. "Are you Hero Bai?" Bai Ning heard someone calling him. He temporarily put aside the idea of arguing with the mule and turned to look at the person. It's rare to see such a delicate person in this world. Bai Ning threw away the fodder in his hand, stroked the beard on his face, and cracked a smile. "Judging from your accent, you don't sound like a local, and you don't look like someone who was robbed by bandits to seek justice." Bai Ning was 39 years old. He was considered to be in his prime. His exposed chest was strong and firm, and there was a layer of sweat on his surface. Wei Xi calmly stopped the guards who were about to step forward. He looked at Bai Ning with a smile. "I'm indeed a foreigner. I heard that Hero Bai had settled down here, so I prepared a small gift and came to visit. If I've offended you in any way, I hope you can forgive me." Bai Ning felt uncomfortable when he heard this. He was an uncouth man. The neighbors he came in contact with were also uncouth. He rarely interacted with scholars. He saw that Wei Xi's clothes were neat and tidy, but he was bare-chested. His thick pants were tied at his waist with a hemp rope. However, Bai Ning was also a thick-skinned person. His bronze-colored skin did not show the slightest bit of embarrassment. "Oh, so you're looking for me?" Bai Ning looked at Wei Xi with a faint smile, sizing him up from his feet to his head. His eyes flashed with satisfaction. Bai Ning casually pulled over a bench, sat down, crossed his long legs, and looked like a rascal. He patted the other corner of the bench with his right hand. "Don't beat around the bush, just say what you want to say. Come, young lad, sit down and talk." When Wei Xi saw this familiar scene, he could not help but secretly laugh. Bai Ning had done the same thing in his previous life. At that time, Wei Xi felt that this person was rude and disgraceful, but due to his upbringing, he did not say anything. Not only did he not feel offended by meeting an old friend in this life, he even found it a little interesting. Moreover, Bai Ning was 39 this year. He was much older than Wei Xi and could barely be considered as part of his father's generation. It would be impolite to refuse. It was Bai Ning's turn to feel uncomfortable. Bai Ning's temperament was like this. If you were unreasonable to him, he would be even more unreasonable. If you were to soften, he wouldn't be able to be unreasonable at all. "Tell me the truth. What are you doing in a remote and desolate place?" Wei Xi smiled and said, "Didn't I say it just now? Xi has specially come to look for Hero Bai." Bai Ning didn't believe this. Outsiders called him Hero Bai because he led the youths in the countryside to repel the bandits and maintain the peace of the region, earning himself a good reputation. Bai Ning knew that this could only be regarded as a small quarrel. How could it provoke a gentleman like Wei Xi in front of him? "Then why are you looking for me?" Bai Ning looked at Wei Xi's appearance and then thought of his own. Bai Ning, who had always been casual and sloppy, felt goosebumps all over his body. Wei Xi said, "Of course it's to recruit Hero Bai, so that a bright pearl will not be covered in dust." Bai Ning was startled and couldn't help but pick his ear with his little finger. "What did you say? A bright pearl will be covered in dust?" Him? Has the brain of this fool in front of him been cracked open? "I'm just a boorish man. I only have strength but no other skills." Bai Ning rubbed his hands awkwardly and stood up suddenly. He grabbed the reins hanging on the mule and tightened his muscles all over his body. He looked rather frightened. "You should find someone else for this matter." "Hero Bai, why are you so modest?" Wei Xi said, "If you have no talent, how can you resist thousands of thugs with just a few hundred youths in the countryside? A few years ago, the southern barbarians wreaked havoc, and Peng County also fell under the tyranny of the barbarians. Only this place is still considered peaceful. Don't tell me that there aren't any heroes here. Heroes say that they have no talent and incompetence, but when it comes to arranging troops and formations, many old generals also sigh at their inferiority. When Wei Ci said this, Bai Ning was like a wild cat that had been provoked and his hair stood on end. There was a hint of fierceness in his eyes. Wei Ci continued, now that the world is in chaos, don't the heroes want to clear the Jade Universe? Being content in a corner will only cause a bright pearl to be covered in dust. Bai Ning dragged the mule and roared anxiously. It's none of your business. Wei Ci followed closely and didn't force him. The poor mule still wanted to stay where it was, but Bai Ning's strength was too great. He could even lift a big cauldron of 3 or 4 stone at will, let alone this stubborn mule. The mule rubbed a long mark on the ground. In the end, it couldn't bear it anymore and took the initiative to follow Wei Ci. Wei Ci followed Bai Ning all the way to his house. Bai Ning's ancestors sold firecrackers and could barely be considered well off. Unfortunately, the past 2 generations were not good at managing the business. Bai Ning was already very poor and could barely make ends meet. In order to support his family, Bai Ning often went hunting in the mountains and earned more money than selling firecrackers. After Wei Ci recruited Bai Ning in his previous life, he heard him talk about his youth. When Bai Ning was young, he saved a crippled old general who had become a beggar. His martial arts and military tactics were all taught by the general. Bai Ning was not successful in business, but he was very talented in martial arts, far more outstanding than the old general. However, Bai Ning came from a humble background and was worried about his old parents at home, so he never joined the army. This dragged on until he was middle-aged and the world was in chaos. This is my house, get out. When Bai Ning saw Wei Ci following him, he grabbed the fence of his house and used his sturdy body to block the way. Wei Ci laughed. Yi observed the stars and calculated with his fingers. I found out that Hero Bai's teacher is the former Tiger General of Nanxing, Gu Chun. Is that true? Bai Ning's expression froze and his large eyes widened. That's not true. I don't know any Gu Chun or Gu Xia. Hero Bai, don't be anxious. Nanxing has already been destroyed. Even if the matter of General Gu Chun is known, it won't bring Hero Bai a fatal disaster. Gu Chun. This was what Wei Ci deduced after careful research in his previous life and was later confirmed by Bai Ning. During the last years of Nanxing, the army was conscripted to suppress the 4 factions of Nanman. The Tiger General Gu Chun made many contributions. Gu Chun was loyal to the emperor and had a straightforward and unyielding character. He offended many nobles and aristocratic families. The latter were afraid that Gu Chun would win in the crusade against Nanman, so they decided to strike first and delay the reinforcements and supplies. Gu Chun was ambushed by the 4 factions of Nanman. The battle report said that he died in battle and his corpse was eaten by the war beasts raised by the 4 factions of Nanman. Later, he was convicted by the court of a groundless crime and implicated his family. Chapter 1163. What are you waiting for? Get straight to the point. What do you want? Bai Ning was so anxious that he didn't even speak Yiyan. Instead, he used Pengjuan's dialect. After he finished speaking, his face revealed an awkward expression. Bai Ning repeated each word in Yiyan. Child, if you have something to say, just say it. What do you want? Wei Ci had a faint smile on his face, as if he didn't see Bai Ning losing his composure. I'm sincerely inviting Hero Bai to come out of retirement. It's a pity that your talents are buried in the countryside. Bai Ning said again, are you bullying me because I'm not well educated? You liar. Go away, or I'll beat you up. Wei Ci was surprised. In his previous life, Bai Ning was also very resistant to coming out of retirement, but not as strongly as he was now. Lying to die? Wei Ci laughed. I'm sincerely inviting you without any deceit. Bai Ning's face was fierce. He had an expression that said, I don't want to listen, I don't want to listen, I just don't want to listen. Wei Ci had no choice but to use his killer move. How about this, I'll make a bet with you. If I win, Hero Bai, why don't you consider becoming an official? Bai Ning raised his eyebrows. His raised beard swayed in the air. He said in a rough voice, what about you if you lose? Wei Ci said, I'll be at your disposal. Bai Ning clapped his hands and let go of the fence gate. He rubbed his palms excitedly. That's good. Then don't go back on your word. There's only one thing. I won't marry a wife, take a concubine, or marry into your family. As soon as Wei Ci said this, Bai Ning's excited expression stiffened, revealing an expression as if he had seen a ghost. Wei Ci smiled and said, although I don't have a wife or children, my heart belongs to someone. I'm afraid that Hero Bai's plan will fail. Bai Ning's voice changed. How do you know? Wei Ci said, I just said it. I observed the stars at night and calculated with my fingers. I know the big and small matters of the past 30 years. I'm not lying. In fact, Bai Ning had proposed marriage to Wei Ci in his previous life. Bai Ning had a daughter who was extremely ugly. She was over 23 years old and was still unmarried. She had been a virgin for a long time, but she was still unmarried. If it weren't for Bai Ning's protection in the countryside, the villagers would have been indebted to him. Otherwise, the rumors and slanders would have killed his daughter. In Wei Ci's previous life, Bai Ning's recruitment was delayed by 1 or 2 years. At that time, his daughter was not married yet, let alone in this life. What else do you know? I know a little. Wei Ci said, the content of the bet is simple. I will randomly calculate 2 things. If they are accurate, I will win. How about that? Bai Ning felt guilty, but Wei Ci did not look like a fortune teller who set up a stall on the streets. 15 minutes later, who is your lord? Bai Ning was also depressed. He was just a rough man from the countryside. How could he have imagined that there would be an immortal-like gentleman who would come to recruit him? Moreover, he even acted as if he was determined to win. Since when did he become so popular? Wei Ci smiled and said, my master is Lord Lanting of Dongqing, the governor of Wanzhou. My lord dispatched Ci Nan to discuss the matter of forming an alliance with Yang Tao. Ci Bandao heard of righteous Hero Bai's heroic act of protecting the village and was filled with admiration. Thus, he searched for you several times and personally came to invite you. Bai Ning was stunned. From Dongqing? Wei Ci knew what he was hesitating about. Righteous Hero Bai, Pengjun is the site of 3 wars. It won't be peaceful for long. If you insist on staying here, the safety of your family will be difficult to guarantee. As far as Wei Ci knew, it was not that Bai Ning had never thought of becoming an official. However, he was already old. Almost 40 years old was considered old in the ranks of military generals. Moreover, he was of low birth. If he joined the army, he could only be a low-ranking soldier. He was almost the most worthless cannon fodder on the battlefield. Even if he had the courage to kill the enemy, the barracks could not even provide weapons and armor. Who could he kill? It was very difficult for a low-ranking soldier to climb up. Every step was made by piling up the enemy's heads. Bai Ning was an old man and had almost no chance of making a name for himself. Instead of that, he might as well stay in Pengjun and lead the village soldiers to fight the bandits. It was not that Bai Ning did not understand. Since the fall of Nanchang, Pengjun had changed more than 20 masters in a few years. There were fewer young adults and it was more difficult to survive. However, Bai Ning did not want to leave his hometown and run to another country. Let me think again. Although the bet did not force Bai Ning to join, Wei Ci's calculations were accurate. Bai Ning had to be cautious. In this world that did not believe in science, a quack like Wei Si was quite popular. This was made by your daughter? Wei Si looked at the crossbow placed on the wooden shelf in the room and took it down to play with it. What a clever idea. Bai Ning said proudly, of course it was made by our Xia. It's the best in the surrounding area. Wei Si was not surprised by Bai Ning's performance. There were many reasons why Bai Yuexia had been dragged from a virgin to an old unmarried woman, not just because of her appearance. Although she was ugly, she was smart and quick-witted since she was a child. She could learn anything with just a little bit. It was said that she was even taught by the current generation of Mahists. She was very excellent in the art of mechanisms. She was really a woman with a clear mind. Because her appearance was not good, she wanted to find a husband who was talented in appearance but not limited to appearance. Apart from that, she had other high requirements. She scared off a group of suitors, but Bai Ning still indulged her. With Bai Ning supporting her, Bai Yuexia did not have to worry about when she would get married. Just as they were talking, a clear female voice came from outside. Father, there's a guest at home? Wei Si looked over and saw a plainly dressed woman push open the door and enter. She looked mature, but her hair was tied up in a bun like an unmarried woman. Bai Yuexia's appearance took after her father. Her facial features tended to be strong, and the lines of her face were not as soft as ordinary women. At first glance, one would think that she was a man. Her eyebrows were thick and thick, her eyes were dark and bright, and her skin was a little dark yellow and rough. If that was all, she would not be called ugly. However, there was a huge purple-brown birthmark on her face, which occupied most of her face. She looked as ferocious as a malicious spirit. Seeing that there was an immortal-like beauty in the house, Bai Yuexia could not help but take a few more glances. Wei Si's expression was calm. He was not frightened by her appearance at all, and there was no look of contempt in his eyes. This made Bai Yuexia unable to help but take a few more glances. This is a distinguished guest from Dongqing. Xia, go and make a pot of tea for the guest. Bai Yuexia bowed slightly and did as she was told. I wonder what brings this esteemed guest to my humble abode. Bai Ning said, he's here to persuade me to become an official, but I haven't decided yet. I want to hear Xia's opinion. A distinguished guest from Dongqing? Become an official? Bai Yuexia's hand that was making tea paused. She asked hesitantly, Sir, are you working for Lord Lanting? Bai Ning said, Yes, that's what he said. Wei Si laughed. Bai Nyangzi is very intelligent. You guessed correctly. There are only a few families in Dongqing. I was just guessing randomly. Bai Yuexia showed a rare look of embarrassment. She lowered her head shyly and said softly, I have also guessed others, but among the many families in Dongqing, only Lord Lanting does not care about family background and only uses talent. Bai Ning's family background was very low, but Wei Si personally came to invite him. It seemed that only Jiang Pengji could do so. Bai Ning looked at his daughter as if he had seen a ghost. This shy little girl in front of him was really his daughter? Wei Si was speechless. Wait. Chapter 1164. In his previous life, he and Bai Yuexia had not interacted much, but he knew that Bai Yuexia had a mysterious love and closeness for His Majesty. The way Bai Yuexia looked at His Majesty always made him unhappy. Now that he thought about it, that gaze contained not only reverence and worship, but also a deeper meaning. Wei Si's expression did not change, but his heart was in turmoil. Bai Ning laughed. Apart from her looks, Xia is good in everything. She's worthy of the best man in the world. After saying that, Bai Ning signaled Wei Si with his eyes. Should he change his mind and marry his daughter? Wei Si smiled awkwardly and said, Hero Bai is right. Lady Bai will definitely find the best husband in the future. If it was in the past, Wei Si would definitely not be worried. Ever since he found out about his lord's background, he was a little confused. The lord's background was mysterious. She must have been very open-minded in her previous life, so she regarded men as normal. Then, Wei Ci could not help but let his imagination run wild. It was normal for men to be attracted to men, so was it normal for women to be attracted to men? When he thought of this, he felt the pressure on his shoulders suddenly increase. Opening the door to a new world, Wei Ci turned his head and recalled again. He realized that he was surrounded by rivals in love. Among the many rivals in love, Bai Yuexia was the most threatening one. If they were to fight, Wei Ci felt that he could not defeat her. In her previous life, Bai Yuexia was a very low-key woman. However, no matter how low-key she was, it couldn't conceal the fact that she stood in the imperial court as a woman. She was the Minister of Works. A few years later, she paid her respects to the Prime Minister at the Golden Unicorn platform. Before she retired, she even sent her portrait to the Heavenly Craftsman ranking of the Golden Scale Pavilion. Just from the Golden Scale Pavilion's 3 lists of civil, martial, and heavenly works, Wei Ci, who did not even have a ranking in his previous life, was under immense pressure. After that, His Majesty proposed the policy of 1 family, 2 households, and Bai Yuexia was the first one in the court to stand up and support it. In comparison, Wei Ci was apprehensive of the power in the imperial court and reacted a beat slower, unlike Bai Yuexia who staked everything on one throw. What was 1 door, 2 households? To put it bluntly, a family was allowed to have 2 heads of household. Children born to a woman could inherit both the family property of their mother and the family property of their father. The children's surname and household registration could be decided through consultation. Many officials thought that this policy was specially established to ensure that the Empress would continue to exist for a long time. At the beginning of the proposal, almost no one objected. If they were to oppose the 1 family, 2 households policy, wouldn't they be supporting the Empress in a disguised form? Just like ordinary women and children who married their husbands, wouldn't they? This was not nonsense. Whoever objected would have their brains filled with seawater. However, this was only the opinion of a mediocre person. Wei Ci was very clear that the 1 family with 2 households was actually to support the female household system. After the establishment of the Jiang dynasty, the world was at peace, and there were fewer and fewer women who set up their own households. In some places, there was even a culture of despising women. It wasn't that the women didn't want to establish a female household. It was just that there were too few good men who were willing to marry into the family, and the pressure of establishing a female household was too great. Many women could only choose to compromise. Even if they got married and earned more money, their income could only be regarded as supporting the family and not supporting the family. In order to solve this problem, His Majesty proposed to have 2 heads of household and set up a series of new marriage laws. From the start of the new law, Jiang Chao had a clear concept of joint property after marriage. Of course, concubines and children born of concubines were not considered joint property. Their daily expenses and future marriage residences were only managed by the man. This made the majority of legal wives applaud and feel even more grateful to His Majesty. One had to know that before this system was introduced, many legal wives not only had to help their husbands take care of the family property, but they also had to manage the daily expenses and various trivial matters of the concubines and children born of concubines. When faced with a husband who favored his concubines to the detriment of his wife, the legal wives couldn't even defend the interests of themselves and their children. Although the 1 family with 2 households was to protect the continuation of the Empress, they were also beneficiaries of the new law. At first, Jiang Chao men didn't care about this new law. Anyway, they didn't covet their wives' money. Even if there were people who coveted their wives' dowry, who would have the face to say it? There was nothing wrong with the imperial court promulgating laws to protect the Empress, the royal family, and the legitimate children of the legal wife. However, not long after, many men started to complain. They couldn't stand this kind of grievance. There was a story that left a deep impression on Wei Ci. An official paid a high monthly salary to hire the legal wife to take care of the children born of concubines and a house full of concubines. That's right, the husband paid the legal wife to help take care of the concubines and children born of concubines. The laws of the Jiang Chao dynasty stipulated that concubines couldn't touch the authority of a housekeeper. It was fine among the people. If it was discovered that a concubine had taken over the authority of the legal wife, it would at most cause a bad reputation. If an imperial court official was found to have a concubine touch the authority of a housekeeper, he would be demoted or even dismissed. Cultivating one's moral character, managing one's family, governing the country, and bringing peace to the world. If even the house was in a mess, how could one be an official if one didn't understand the orthodoxy? If the legal wife didn't care about the concubines and children born of concubines, then the husband could only take care of them himself. During the day, he would go out to earn money and work. At night, he would come back to settle accounts and take care of the concubines' rouge, cosmetics, and cloth materials. The men couldn't take it anymore. Many court officials took advantage of this to make things difficult for them. Since ancient times, men took care of external affairs while women took care of internal affairs. Concubines and children born of concubines were also the responsibility of the legal wife. In the end, they were ruthlessly beaten down by the Empress and the aristocratic families, and soon, there was no more movement. The Jiang Chao dynasty was newly established. Those who took in a bunch of concubines were mostly the new nobility or poor families who had gained power. Once they gained power, they became arrogant. There were many poor families who drove out their first wives or neglected their wives, and took in beautiful concubines. The aristocratic families had a long history. They had always claimed to be supporters of orthodoxy, and there were also strict rules for taking in concubines. For them, the loss of the new policy was not big. On the contrary, the poor families and the new nobility were angry. The aristocratic families took this opportunity to stand on the Empress's side to suppress the poor families. As the leader of the female officials, Bai Yuexia was the direction and role model for all the women to work hard. She carried out the new policy and played a good role in leading the way. She had a son and a daughter. The son followed his husband, and the daughter followed her. Bai Yuexia's son was not capable, but her daughter was different. She became the crown princess Jiang Yan's most trusted confidant. From a rational point of view, Wei Ci admired Bai Yuexia very much. When the world despised women, she reached such a high position that it was difficult for others to catch up to her. From an emotional point of view, Wei Ci really couldn't force himself to like Bai Yuexia. It was good enough that he didn't treat her as a love rival. But if he could go back in time, he would still come to recruit Bai Ning. After all, the Lord's interests were the most important. Love was just a small matter. From what you said, Lady Bai admires my lord very much. Wei Ci smiled warmly, like a quietly blooming spring flower, bright and warm. Bai Yuexia spoke quickly. The world treats women so unfairly, but the Duke of Lanting still walked to a point where no one can catch up to him. Isn't he a role model for all the women in the world? I've admired him for a long time. In a moment of excitement, I made a fool of myself in front of the teacher. I'm indebted to the Duke of Lanting for not abandoning me. If father can become an official and work for him, pacifying the world and clearing the Jade world, it will be a blessing for us father and daughter. Wei Ci was speechless. I only want to recruit your father. I didn't include you. Chapter 1165. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't upset. Wei Ci recalled many things from the past, such as the details of how he recruited Bai Ning in his previous life. In his previous life, he had tried to recruit Bai Ning on behalf of his lord, Enchanting. At that time, he was poor and had only a few generals under him. Enchanting did not have the right to look down on talent, so he recruited whoever he could. Although Bai Ning was old, he was still vigorous and could be considered a fierce general. An old steed in the stable had great ambitions. An old general who was almost 40 years old could not be underestimated. It wasn't difficult to recruit Bai Ning, but he had run into a snag with Bai Yuexia. She had even ridiculed his master, Enchanting, in a neither soft nor hard way. However, Enchanting was slightly cold and powerless at the time. Bai Yuexia's harsh words were the truth, so he couldn't act up in front of Bai Ning. Recalling his past life and comparing it to this life, Wei Si almost vomited blood. In his past life, he had to persuade Bai Ning to become an official after much persuasion. Bai Yuexia ridiculed him, but he still had to maintain a polite smile. In this life, Bai Yuexia used her lord's name. Without a second word, she packed her father and herself into officialdom. It was obviously going so smoothly. Why was Wei Si so unwilling? How infuriating. Since they had decided to become officials, Bai Ning and his daughter had to pack up their belongings and leave with Wei Si. Wei Si could use this time to persuade Yang Tao to form an alliance and send troops. Bai Ning was still in a daze even after Wei Si left. "Xia, do you really want to go to Dongqing? That place is far away from home. Father might not be able to protect you." Bai Ning drank the bitter sake and mumbled, "I wanted to find a good family for you, but if you leave Pingjun, I'm afraid it won't be easy." Bai Yuexia was swiftly packing up her belongings. "After the war, you can come back whenever you want." Bai Yuexia said, "As for your daughter's marriage, you don't have to worry about it. They were just a bunch of boorish men who could only be seen by their appearance. To put it bluntly, they were nothing more than trash. I don't care for those with embroidered pillows. If I were to marry, it must be a man of great stature like the Duke of Lanting. I don't want to make do with just anyone." Bai Ning became even more worried, his thick black brows knitted into a knot. "Ah, Xia, the Duke of Lanting is a woman. That's why I'm looking for a man as capable as him. I'm not marrying the Duke of Lanting." Bai Yuexia looked at her father. What kind of tricks did he have in his mind? "She's the role model of our generation of women. If we could live happily like her, how carefree would that be?" Bai Yuexia really admired Jiang Pengji and became her die-hard fan in no time. She was a woman who was despised and criticized because of her appearance. How much had Bai Yuexia suffered and how many tears had she shed because of this face? It would have been fine if she was stupid, but she was slow in perceiving the malice of others. Naturally, she would not be hurt by it. However, she was extremely intelligent and couldn't turn a blind eye to it. Why couldn't her intelligence and talent win the recognition and love of others? This question perplexed her for many years. Only later did she realize that it was because she was ugly. For a woman, being ugly was an original sin. She could forget about getting anyone's attention in this lifetime. According to the rites of Zhou, a woman has 4 virtues. Virtue is speech and appearance. She thought that except for her lack of appearance, she had the other 3 virtues. Unfortunately, she still couldn't compare to those illiterate, vulgar, and even unfilial shrews in the countryside. Because they were good-looking and could give birth, they were considered perfect as a woman. How unfair was that? Although Bai Yuexia didn't show it, she had suppressed her feelings for many years. She had tried every possible way to reject the marriage that Bai Ning had proposed for her. Those men were just ordinary people. As soon as they saw her face, their eyes honestly reflected what they were thinking in their hearts. Disgust and contempt. Bai Yuexia was proud and arrogant. How could she tolerate herself groveling to someone who was inferior to her in every aspect? Once she groveled, her pride and dignity would be broken. It wasn't until after the Huangshui meeting that Jiang Pengji's identity as a woman was revealed. Everyone in the world knew that Lu Shi was a woman and not a man. The moment she heard the news, Bai Yuexia was like a lone traveler in the dark who finally saw a bright light. It was dazzling and dazzling, hanging high in the sky. That kind of joy and excitement couldn't be understood by others. That was her son. At that moment, she really wanted to turn into Kuafu and chase after it until she died. Bai Ning didn't know what his daughter was thinking. He felt very ashamed. His old parents and wife had already turned to dust. Other than his daughter, he was all alone in the world. It was his fault that he wasn't able to let his daughter live a good life. Bai Ning watched his daughter pack up the pieces of wood on the shelves and asked, "Are we taking these away too?" "Of course." They might be useful in the future. Bai Yuexia nimbly packed them into the boxes. The wooden materials on the shelves in the house were all gadgets that she had made. There were 6 big boxes in total. I heard that Zixiao wants to persuade Yang Tao to mobilize his troops. What do you think is the possibility of this happening? Bai Ning couldn't help, so he tried to find a topic to chat about. 50-50, I think. Bai Yuexia said uncertainly. Ong Tao and Su Bei have a feud of half a province. Zhangzhou was seized. How could Yang Tao tolerate this? However, I see that Wei Zixiao is very confident. I'm afraid he has other bargaining chips that will allow him to easily persuade the other party. Bai Ning had also heard about the situation in Dongqing, but he didn't know as much as his daughter, who was chasing after her idol. He said, "When I have a firm foothold in Lord Lanting's camp, I will definitely find you a husband who is both talented and charming." Bai Yuexia's expression didn't change. She knew that her father was worried that if something happened to him, she would be lonely and have no one to rely on. Therefore, he wanted to create a small family for her so that she would have a foothold. However, she was already indifferent to marriage. As for a husband, she would leave it to fate. Bai Ning and his daughter waited for 2 days. That afternoon, a group of soldiers with extraordinary auras stood outside the house. After asking around, they found out that Wei Ci had already convinced Yang Tao to form an alliance. Wei Ci had asked Yang Tao to send someone to fetch the father and daughter. How did you convince Yang Tao? Bai Yuexia was astonished. Yang Tao's father's murderer, Zhao Shao, is under Su Bei's camp. Wei Ci smiled and said, Yang Tao lost half of Zhangzhou to Su Bei. He can't tolerate this. Moreover, if he waits for my lord to pacify the Huang and Su families, he won't be able to keep his half of Zhangzhou. No matter how well Yang Tao developed in Nanxing, his roots were in Dongqing. If he didn't seize this opportunity to return to Dongqing and gain a firm foothold, Dongqing would be her world after Jiang Pengji destroyed the Huang and Su families. Bai Yuexia's eyes lit up, but she said, I heard that the Huang and Su families are powerful. Since the war at the northern borderline, the Duke of Lanting has been exhausted from fighting for a long time. Now that he's mobilized his troops against the 2 families, I wonder what his chances of winning are. It's not that my lord is belligerent. It's obvious that others aren't willing to lay down their butcher's knives. She has no choice but to fight, he said. The chances of winning are not high. 100% is enough. If not for the Nie family of Zhongzhao's temporary withdrawal from the scene and the Yi family of Beiyuan's domestic politics, Jiang Pengji would have to face the predicament of fighting on all sides. Now that it was 1 against 2, the difficulty was very low. Now that she had joined forces with Yang Tao, they still couldn't win 2 against 2. It was better to rest early. Bai Yuexia pursed her lips, her smile rippling. I heard that the Duke of Lanting wrote to Su Bei and said, I want 100% of the 9 provinces and 4 seas. Why was her lord so arrogant and likable? Wei Ci was speechless. Chapter 1166. Even though Wei Ci spent 2 days to convince Yang Tao to form an alliance, the entire process was not smooth sailing. Instead, it was full of twists and turns. Yang Tao was in the pro-war faction, but his subordinates were not interested in it. If it weren't for Yan Lin's support, Yang Tao wouldn't have been able to suppress all the opposing voices and form an alliance. Yang Tao's old subordinates were brought over from Dongqing, but after they took root in Nanxing, the talents they recruited were all locals of Nanxing. He was able to gain a foothold in Nanxing not only because of his old subordinates, but also because of the Nanxing family. As mentioned before, the aristocratic families occupied more than 60% of the world's wealth. The longer the inheritance, the richer the family's wealth. If they lacked manpower, they would send manpower. If they lacked money, they would send money. If they lacked soldiers, they would buy soldiers. There was nothing in this world that money couldn't buy. If there was something, it was definitely not enough. Yang Tao accepted the olive branch extended by the aristocratic families and received their generosity. Only then did he have the confidence to send troops to start his own empire. Since he had received benefits from them, he naturally had to give them something in return. After all, not everyone was like Jiang Pengji. She could forcefully reject the aristocratic families, but others did not have the confidence to do so. Even for Jiang Pengji, there was a certain element of luck in her success. During the earthquake in Shangjing, there were countless casualties and refugees everywhere. The royal family of Dongqing disregarded the lives of the people and forcefully moved the capital. The Tsing-Yi army and the Red Lotus group took advantage of the situation to rise. Jiang Pengji seized the opportunity to stand up and become the backbone of the people of Wanzhou. They recruited soldiers and bought horses, absorbed young and strong refugees to strengthen themselves, and accumulated primitive capital by harming the northern borderline. At the same time, they mobilized troops to suppress the Tsing-Yi army and the Red Lotus group, and plundered their assets. Her success is almost impossible to replicate. The right time, the right place, and the right people were indispensable. When Wei Ci came forward to persuade them to form an alliance, the officials under Yang Tao who were from aristocratic families were unwilling. They wanted to set their sights on Nansheng. He would unify Nansheng and make himself the emperor. What benefits could Yang Tao reap by crossing over to fight Su Bei and Huang Song? This battle was won, and the person who benefited the most was Jiang Pengji. Huang Song's and Su Bei's territories had all been taken over by her. If Yang Tao went to war, he would only be able to take back half of Zhangzhou at most. Dongqing had 6 prefectures and 21 counties. Among them, 5 prefectures and 19 counties were under Jiang Pengji's control. With the addition of the northern borderline, the territory under her rule was larger than the original Dongqing. It was more than enough for her to establish a country and ascend the throne. What's the point of Yang Tao only taking Zhangzhou? Don't be fooled by the fact that the children of aristocratic families looked like they were above the common people, but when it came to accounting, they were very shrewd. Wei Ci was put in a difficult position, but this was nothing to him. He knew 80% of these officials who were from Nansheng aristocratic families. Back when Enshui returned to Nansheng to develop, he was penniless. In order to obtain the help of these aristocratic families, Wei Ci had put in a lot of effort. Even after so many years had passed, Wei Ci still remembered the situation of each family and their connections. He had not been afraid in his previous life, so how could he be afraid in this life? In the words of his lord, none of these landowning households could fight. Trying to persuade these people, rather than using extravagant promises, it was better to say 1 or 2 words that were concerned about their own interests. Although the opposition from the aristocratic families was loud, the final decision-maker was still made by Yang Tao. Yang Tao wasn't stupid. Even though he had borrowed the power of the aristocratic families, he wouldn't be turned into a puppet by the other party. Even if Yang Tao couldn't make it, he still had Yan Lin to protect his father. Military advisor, can't you persuade the Lord to give up on the idea of forming an alliance? Yan Lin said, the Lord has already made up her mind. There's no point in trying to persuade her. Putting aside the hatred of killing his father and seizing the state, Yan Lin didn't approve of Yang Tao and Jiang Pengji forming an alliance. The reason could be summed up in 4 words: asking a tiger for its skin. During the alliance meeting at Huangshui, Yan Lin felt that Jiang Pengji was full of ambition. This person's appetite would never be satisfied with Dongqing or the northern borderline. If the Lord allied with her to kill Su Bei and Huang Song, Yan Lin deeply suspected that she would turn around and stab Yang Tao. This woman had done many things to kill her acquaintances. The official said, "Sai, if we send troops to attack Huang Song and Su Bei, our supply lines will definitely be tight. If we're not careful, we'll be doomed eternally." This official wasn't exaggerating. He was sincerely considering things for Yang Tao. In his opinion, a man had to be ruthless if he wanted to achieve great things. If Yang Tao rashly sent troops to fight a foreign war to avenge his father, he would suffer greatly. It was better to swallow this hatred. If Zhao Shao fell into Jiang Pengji's hands, he would die anyway. Haven't the Lord thought about your concerns? Yan Lin frowned and let out a long sigh. But, you've only seen the current situation in Nansheng. You haven't considered the situation in the world. Lu Shi is a person with great ambitions. She won't be satisfied with Dongqing or the northern borderline. After she unifies Dongqing, she'll have a year or two to cultivate. Nansheng will be her next target. Zhangzhou must not be lost. Without Zhangzhou as the front line, Jiang Pengji could send troops to the border after unifying Dongqing. By then, Yang Tao would be in a dangerous situation. When the official heard this, his expression changed drastically. After a while, he said, Lu Shi is just a woman. How can she be so ambitious? Yan Lin didn't speak. What did ambition have to do with whether she was a woman or not? Or perhaps, in many people's minds, Jiang Pengji should be satisfied with conquering Dongqing? Yan Lin said indifferently, the northern borderline has been destroyed for almost a year. She had even destroyed the northern borderline. Why did people always think that she was a woman who could be easily fooled? If all the women in the backyard behaved like her, there would be no place for men in the world. The official looked embarrassed. After a while, he took his leave. Yan Lin said to the back hall, My lord, come out. Yang Tao poked his head out to take a look at the enemy situation. Seeing that the official had really left, he felt relieved and came out. Xiaoyang, you don't agree with the alliance either? The pros and cons are equal. It's all up to my lord. From Yan Lin's point of view, it didn't matter which side he chose. But since Yang Tao wanted to fight, he could only support him. Yang Tao said, I once swore in front of my father's coffin that I would kill Zhao Shao with my own hands. Now that Zhao Shao has sided with Su Bei, and Su Bei has taken half of my state, we have to settle the score no matter what. Moreover, if we can take back Zhangzhou, we can use it as an outpost to restrain Lu Shi. The first two sentences were from Yang Tao's heart. The last sentence was plagiarizing Yan Lin's idea. Yan Lin didn't expose him. Instead, he smiled faintly and said, That's what I was thinking. Wei Ci was very efficient, but sending troops to war was different from other things. It required a certain amount of preparation time. Yang Tao's troops had yet to set off, but Jiang Pengji's side couldn't help but take the lead and break the stalemate. In the beginning, they were just probing each other. Every time they fought, there were only about 100 casualties. It was a small skirmish. It was the same principle as scratching an itch through one's boots. They couldn't really scratch the itch. Instead, the more they scratched, the more itchy it became. Su Bei could still keep his composure, but Jiang Pengji felt some pressure. If the supply line was too long, it would inevitably increase the logistical pressure. The cost of fighting a war would be even higher than that of the northern borderline. Huang Song and Su Bei secretly formed an alliance and secretly sent troops to war. As the saying goes, hit the snake where it hurts. If the supply line was tight, they would attack it first. Chapter 1167. The grain transportation line was a top secret, but there was no such thing as an impenetrable wall in the world. It was impossible to guard against the scouts and spies alone. Jiang Pengji was handling military affairs and inspecting the training of the troops. The messenger had something to report. What happened? She asked. The 50,000 don of grain transported from Xing City in Hu County was attacked. The messenger said with a heavy expression. Jiang Pengji crushed the pen in her hand. She didn't show any agitation, but her eyes turned cold. What do you mean? The grain transported from Xing City in Hu County was attacked? Jiang Pengji asked, Who attacked? The messenger didn't answer, but she had an idea. Su Bei's troops were almost all under her nose. The person who could attack the grain line without anyone noticing must be Huang Song. The messenger said, although the attacker didn't show his flag, from the weapons we found, it should be Huang Song. The weapons were engraved with the surname Yuan and a simple family emblem. The Yuan family was Huang Song's family. Jiang Pengji gritted her teeth in anger. It was too inconvenient to transmit information in ancient times. When she received the news that the grain team was attacked, Huang Song had gone home early. Do the military advisors know about this? Have you sent anyone to intercept them? Jiang Pengji knew that the 50,000 dawn of grain could not be kept, but those who came to steal the grain could not think about leaving. They had to stay alive. What are their arrangements? Jiang Pengji was overseeing the main army. These days, she had been handling military affairs and calming people down. Yang Si and the others were at the front lines. Naturally, their reaction speed was much faster than hers. If they sent troops to intercept them in time, they might even be able to beat those thieves to the ground and send them to the King of Hell. The messenger said, military advisor Qiguan learned about this and has already sent troops to intercept them. Jiang Pengji trusted Qiguan Rank's ability. Since he had taken action, he would not let Huang Song leave unscathed. Even so, Jiang Pengji was so angry that her liver hurt. She had spent a lot of money to build the heavy cavalry battalion. Even if she recovered by plundering the nobles of the northern borderline, she still felt that she was poor. In troubled times, no matter how precious jewels and gold were, they were not as precious as grain. Although Hu County was a major grain-producing county with a large area of arable land, it was not easy for farmers to farm. Grain was planted, not conjured. Every grain was precious. She couldn't help but clench her fists at the thought of Huang Song stealing or burning 50,000 dawn of grain. The audience in the streaming room had been following Jiang Pengji for some years. Occasionally, they could guess her mood from her expression and gaze. Needless to say, given the situation before him, she was definitely angry. Hua Hua loves pighead, host, don't be angry. Our 850,000 salted fish army supports you. 50,000 dawn of grain is nothing. Each of us will give you some as a tip. When the time comes, you can exchange it for 1,000,000 dawn of grain. Eat one bowl and throw it away, cook one pot and throw it away. Let those poor bastards see the might of a nouveau riche. He wanted to let them know one thing: with money, you can really do whatever you want. I'm not angry anymore. Jie, well, let me ask a stupid question. Is 50,000 dawn of grain a lot? Jiang Pengji rarely got angry. Many of the audience had been following her novel for so many years, but until now, they had never seen any expression other than a calm or smiling expression on her face. Lo Siji Lianmeng, 50,000 dawn is a lot. If you guys have been following her updates since a long time ago, you should know that the host once did a show in Hejin County where she limited the purchase of grain to suppress the price of grain. At that time, the host didn't have much grain on her hands. She had to make a tight calculation and barely suppressed the price of ordinary grain in Hejin County. Think about it, how much is 50,000 dawn? If it falls into Huang Song's hands, he won't leave it for the host even if he burns it. Gui Kai Guofengxiu, according to my observations over the years, one dawn in this world is about 50 kilograms. Let me calculate for you guys. If an adult eats one catty a day, then 10,000 people will eat 10,000 catties, which is equivalent to 5,000 kilograms, which is 100 dawn. With the intuitive numbers, the audience could not help but gasp. Tudu Feichio, that's not right. The cooks who transport the grain also need to eat. Their grain is also paid from the total amount of grain transported. Xinjia, but I remember that Xing City in Hu County is only 7 or 8 days' journey on foot from the front line. No matter how much the cooks can eat, how much can they eat? When the 50,000 dawn of grain is transported to the front line, there will definitely be a large portion left. Now that Huang Song has intercepted it, it would be strange if the host doesn't feel distressed. The audience was already used to the plot of television dramas. They thought that millions of dawn of grain could be easily taken out to fight a war. Little did they know that 50,000 dawn of grain could already support a small-scale war. It was true that Jiang Pengji did not lack grain, but it did not mean that she would not feel distressed if the enemy intercepted or burned her grain. The audience was silent for a moment. Zhongfei yesterday's stars. I remember that when the Dongqing earthquake occurred in Shangjing, the streamers seemed to have exchanged a lot of grain from the streaming system. 50,000 dawn of grain is indeed a lot, but there are more people in our streaming room. A conservative estimate is that if each person donates 1 caddy of grain, it should be enough. Because Jiang Pengji was too unconventional, she had only once asked for a reward during the time when she had been streaming for many years. If not for someone reminding her, the audience would have almost forgotten that she had a golden finger of the system. What was there to be afraid of when there was a lack of grain? The 850,000 salted fish lacked everything except 3 to 5 caddies of grain. As long as Jiang Pengji asked, they would definitely donate. They had been freeloading in the streaming room for many years. Now that they finally had a reason to spend money, they must let the people in the other world see their extravagance. Lu Yukong, yes, yes. Streamer, let us drown Huang's song with grain. The audience's interest was aroused. Before the tycoon could give a reward, Jiang Pengji actually stopped him. Host V, no need. Keep it to buy candy for yourself. Even if you give me a reward, I won't exchange it for grain. It's meaningless. Jiang Pengji had her own considerations. The earthquake in Shangjing was a last resort. Now that they were far from being at the end of the line, she would not use the system's exchange platform. It was not because she wanted to save face, but because she had to pay a price if she used it. Taking 10,000 steps back, if there was really a shortage of grain, she would not need the audience to give her a reward. After so many years of streaming, her popularity points had long accumulated to a terrifying number. If she really exchanged it for grain, not to mention drowning Huang's song, she could drown all the people in the 5 countries in the world in the sea of rice. Hearing her say so, the audience could only suppress the impulse to stick their heads out. Qinshang Nan Bai Yueguang, okay, Brainiac, I'll go buy candy now. Jiang Pengji, after the audience's interruption, Jiang Pengji's anger was also replaced by reason. Qingxing Liya, streamer, without the 50,000 dawn of grain, will the army be short of grain? There was no one in the tent. Jiang Pengji said in a low voice, no. We can't put all our eggs in one basket. Similarly, there will not be only one grain line. Hu County and Xingcheng are one. There are a few others. Without the 50,000 dawn, they will at most suffer a little, but they will not starve. Not to mention, Qiguan Rang would not let Huang's song take advantage of them and escape unscathed. Chapter 1168. Su Bei's territory was in the south, while Huang Song's territory was adjacent to Jiang Pengji's, located at the border between the north and the south. Although Huang Song and Su Bei had formed an alliance, the two families were not familiar with each other and did not trust each other well. Currently, they were still in the same bed but sharing different dreams. On the surface, the two families had formed an alliance to resist Jiang Pengji, but the real main force was Su Bei's army. Huang Song assisted from the side. It was not that Huang Song did not want to send troops to confront Jiang Pengji head-on. The key was that the main battlefield was near Hu, Zhe, and Hu counties. If Huang Song sent a large number of troops to participate in the battle, he would definitely have to obtain the approval of the host, Su Bei. This action was akin to Su Bei removing his snail's shell and revealing his defenseless, tender flesh to Huang Song. Huang Song dared to think of it, but Su Bei dared not do it. This was one of the reasons, but there was another main reason. Huang Song had yet to recover from the previous battle. If he went all out now, who could guarantee that Su Bei would not betray him midway? Although the two families were allies, they were still on guard against each other. Neither was willing to trust the other completely. Of course, these reasons that would damage the relationship between allies could not be put out in the open. It was enough for both sides to be aware of it. Huang Song did not send his main force, but he deployed 30,000 elite troops to assist Su Bei. This was the actual number of troops participating in the battle. If the tens of thousands of laborers in the grain transportation team and the water injection army were included, it would not be this number. After rounding up the numbers and boasting, Huang Song raised the flag of 100,000 troops. His 100,000 troops, plus Su Bei's 300,000 troops, amounted to a total of 400,000 troops. The only question was whether Lu Shi was afraid. Jiang Pengji was speechless. Wang Zuazakai Sun Lingjun, smiley face angle, I suddenly thought of Boss Chow's 800,000 troops, the benchmark of the water injection army. Han Zhaolai Di Lu Shuanda, the person above, you are not giving old Chow face. Be careful that the little fairy old Chow will argue with you. Naturally, Jiang Pengji was not afraid. 400,000 troops was indeed a frightening number, but she was not easily intimidated. Perhaps because Jiang Pengji's reaction was too calm, Huang Song felt that he could not bring himself to lose face, so he decided to go big. According to the scouts' information, a batch of 50,000 dawn of grain would be sent from Xingcheng in Hu County to the Sichuan Plains. If they could intercept this batch of food, it would undoubtedly be the greatest boost to their morale, and at the same time, it would also deal a blow to the enemy's morale. The old General Yuan Xian volunteered to go out to battle, rubbing his palms in anticipation of making a contribution. Nie Sun frowned and objected. It's a good thing that the old general is willing to risk his life for the Lord, but we don't have a good understanding of the terrain in Hu County. My lord, why don't we let a general who is familiar with Hu Commandery lead the troops to intercept the grain? If I remember correctly, my lord's camp. Without waiting for Nie Sun to finish speaking, Yuan Sun said, the lord's great cause is the most important. Military advisor Nie should know the severity of the situation. Don't involve your personal grudges in this. Everyone in the tent knew that the relationship between Yuan Xin and Nie Sun was so bad that they were like fire and water. Yuan Xian volunteered to fight, but Nie Sun brushed him off, saying in front of everyone that Yuan Xian was not suitable and recommending a newcomer with no experience. From Yuan Xian's point of view, Nie Sun was trying to challenge him openly. On one hand, he was recommending new generals to build connections in the army, and on the other hand, he was smearing his name in front of his lord. This person's intentions were truly sinister. Although Yuan Xian was a military man who practiced martial arts, his words were harsh and sharp. The moment he opened his mouth, he threw the label of forming a clique for personal gain at Nie Sun. To be honest, this ability to smear one's eyes was not considered too bad in the harem. At least he could survive for more than 10 episodes. Nie Sun's expression darkened. His peripheral vision swept across the people in the tent, and he had to hold back his rebuttal. The war was imminent, and it was not a good thing for civil and military officials to fight. The old general's words are harsh. I'm just taking precautions. The old general is not familiar with the environment in Zhe County. If we fail to intercept the grain and are surrounded, and fall into the enemy's trap due to carelessness, how will we escape? Nie Sun suppressed his anger and explained patiently, but he did not know that he was setting up a terrible flag for himself. If I have any selfish intentions, how can the Lord not see through it with your sharp eyes? Yuan Xian laughed coldly. He did not believe a single word that Nie Sun said. Nie Sun gave in for the sake of the big picture, so Yuan Xian only thought that he was guilty. Not only did he not forgive him, but he was also aggressive. He knew who Nie Sun wanted to recommend. A general from Hu County who was not famous and did not have much experience in battle. Nie Sun wanted to entrust such an important task as intercepting the grain to a newbie. How could he not see through what he was secretly planning? Wasn't it because he saw that the Yuan family's general had too much power in the military, so he wanted to instigate the Lord to support a newbie to balance the military power? If Nie Sun succeeded, those powerful generals would owe him a favor, and his status in the Lord's tent would rise as well. Humph, what a good plan. Yuan Xian had already labeled Nie Sun as a traitor and conspirator. No matter what Nie Sun said or did, he would be accused of conspiring. Yuan Xian stepped out with a cold smile and said, I am willing to make a military pledge. If I cannot intercept this batch of grain, I am willing to be punished by military law. Since the military pledge had been made, Huang Song could not help Nie Sun even if he wanted to. He could only hand the matter of intercepting the grain to Yuan Xian. Nie Sun could only retreat with an ashen face. To run into a madman like Yuan Xian, he must have had 800 lifetimes of bad luck. Helpless, Nie Sun could only privately ask Qing Jing and Feng Zhu to give Yuan Xian an external brain. Yuan Xian, this boorish fellow, dared to defy the heavens and the earth, and Nie Sun, but he did not dare to defy the two most useful strategists in Huang Song's tent. Under their suggestions, Huang Song chose a strategist to follow Yuan Xian and give him advice at critical moments. However, Huang Song and the others were too naive and underestimated how arrogant Yuan Xian was. The operation to intercept the grain was very successful. Although they were resisted by the troops guarding the grain, Yuan Xian had the advantage in numbers and managed to defeat them in a short time. He happily escorted 50,000 dawn of grain back. Humph, Nie Qingyun has nothing to say now. Yuan Xian rode his horse and led the way. He looked very pleased with himself as if he could see the scene of Nie Sun's livid face and being despised by his lord. The strategist who was sent to be the external brain was silent. After these days of interaction, he already knew how bad the relationship between Yuan Xian and Nie Sun was. To be honest, Yuan Xian's conspiracy theories made even him, a proper strategist, gasp in amazement and gape. If not for Yuan Xian's analysis, he would not have known that Nie Sun was such a heinous person. However, Yuan Xian's analysis was very brainwashing. Just by listening to his one-sided words, it really did make some sense. Sigh, poor Nie Sun. General, do not be careless. We are still in Hu County Xing City South Road, we are still in the enemy's territory. What do we want to do if we don't tuck our tails between our legs and leave? Yuan Xian did not care. His confidence was inflated. Chapter 1169. Yuan Xian's experience tells us one thing: don't act pretentiously, or you'll be struck by lightning. Don't raise flags for no reason. Yuan Xian had raised a huge flag, so he couldn't blame others for not giving him face. As they approached the exit of the South Road, the strategist became more and more nervous, not daring to be negligent. On the contrary, Yuan Xian was happily humming a tune. Seeing the strategist's serious expression, he couldn't help but advise, Strategist, why are you so nervous? We intercepted the rations as fast as lightning and as fast as thunder. I'm sure the Lu thieves are still in the dark and don't know that the rear supply line has fallen. How will they stop us and set up an ambush? Yuan Xian hated scholars who dilly-dally and hesitantly. Each and every one of them had groundless worries, and it was annoying. The strategist in front of him was inexperienced and couldn't control Yuan Xian at all, let alone make him listen obediently. Hearing Yuan Xian's words, the strategist couldn't say anything else. Isn't it a pleasure to have friends coming from afar? After marching for an hour and seeing that they were about to leave the south road of Hu County's Xing City, a loud voice resounded in the sky like thunder on a sunny day. The words, "Isn't it a pleasure to have friends coming from afar," echoed in the mountains. Yuan Xian was shocked and hurriedly grabbed the reins. Why don't you rest for a while and let us do our duty as hosts? Just as the layers of echoes faded away, another sentence was uttered. There's an ambush. Yuan Xian couldn't care less about being slapped in the face. He quickly drew his sword and prepared to face the enemy. Just as he finished speaking, the enemy emerged like mushrooms after the rain. The road ahead was blocked, and there were traces of the enemy behind them. Seeing so many enemies appear without a sound, everyone turned pale with fright. The originally orderly formation was now in chaos. Yuan Xian was even more furious. The enemy hadn't even attacked and they were already in chaos. What a stupid teammate. The strategist said, the enemy outnumbers us. General, please make a decision quickly. This strategist was just an advisor and had no military power in the army. Thus, he had to ask for Yuan Xian's permission before he could command the army. Yuan Xian gritted his teeth and said, "Are we really going to burn the 50,000 dawn of rations?" The strategist said, "If we don't burn it, the enemy will definitely take it back. It's not worth it." The enemy had completely surrounded them. If they did not burn the food, these supply wagons would become a burden to their escape. If they encountered someone with combat experience, it would be difficult for them to break out of the encirclement. Instead, they would be worn down by the other party until they died without a complete corpse. It was better to be ruthless and not let the enemy get what he couldn't get. They suffered losses when they burned through their rations, but the enemy's losses were even greater. It wasn't that Yuan Xian didn't know this, but his heart ached. Just as they were about to transport the 50,000 dawn of grain out of Xingqing South Road, they didn't expect that the enemy wouldn't chase after them. Instead, they sent soldiers to block their way. Time was of the essence, and Yuan Xian didn't have much time to think. Burn it. Gather the troops and break out. Although Yuan Xian was petty and liked to snitch on Nye Sun, he was still reliable when it came to major issues. At this moment, Qiguan Rang pinched his feather fan and shook it. Seeing that the enemy had made a move, he moved his wrist, and the feather fan moved down along with his movement. Kill! The horn of attack sounded, resounding through the mountains and fields. The loud and clear echo entered everyone's eardrums. Military advisor, they've set fire to the rations. Before the two armies met, their sharp eyes saw the fire and smoke rising from the supply team. Qiguan Rang sneered and said, "It doesn't matter if the rations are burned. It tastes just right with human flesh." Li Yun couldn't help but feel a chill down his spine. Just the thought of it made his throat ache. Qiguan Rang's eyes were cold, and he said coldly, "The rations can't be saved. If we can save a portion, then we'll be lucky. If not, then it's not a pity. They were the ones who started the fire, so let them bear the consequences themselves. Pass down the order, only surround and not attack." Although Qiguan Rang and his men looked relaxed as they surrounded the area, in reality, they had only been lying in ambush for 4 hours. 4 hours ago, they were still taking shortcuts elsewhere. If they had been a little later, they could only watch as the enemy escaped with the rations. Although the army didn't show any signs of fatigue, they had used up a lot of energy, so it wasn't wise to attack forcefully. Since Yuan Xian and his men were so heartless as to set fire to the rations, then let them have a taste of their own medicine. Unable to break through, they could only be accompanied by the flames. By doing so, not only could they vent their anger, but they could also cover up the army's lack of combat power. What he said just now seemed to be an act to scare the enemy, but in reality, it was Qiguan Rang's psychological attack, using it to create the illusion that they had sufficient combat power. The strategy of only surrounding and not attacking was also to confuse the enemy and exhaust their patience and rationality. Li Yun said, "I will obey your order." Qiguan Rang brought over a small folding stool and sat down to watch the show, fanning himself. The weather was hot. Even though he had changed into a summer robe, he was still sweating profusely. Looking at the continuous fire, he was even angrier. He was leisurely and carefree, but Yuan Xian and the others were suffering. The enemy could always predict the direction they would break through. That was fine, but the enemy was a coward, refusing to fight. The strategist said, "General, don't be anxious. First stabilize the battle formation and gather the troops to break through. Don't be disorderly." The more disorderly they were, the more advantage the enemy had. The fire in the supply wagons was already considerable. Based on the fire, the enemy would not be able to save much rations even if they wanted to. If these 50,000 dawn of rations were burned to ashes, their goal of intercepting the enemy's supply line would be achieved. Now, they only needed to gather the troops in one place and break through. Yuan Xian also knew this, but the strategist's nagging was more annoying than 10,000 flies. "I know about this. You don't have to waste your breath. The strategist's face turned green. He could only hold on to the reins to ensure that he did not lose his composure. He finally understood Mia Sun's pain. He really wanted to jump up and smash this person's head open. Defense was Qiguan Rang's forte. The troops under his tent were also well-trained soldiers. He dared not say that all of them could follow orders strictly, but they would not make mistakes in basic commands. The power of one person was not enough to be feared, but hundreds and thousands of people could form an impenetrable human wall. They could not break through in front, but there was no way back. This was the predicament Yuan Xian was in. What was more frightening was that the fire in the supply wagons at the back was getting bigger. The enemy was further shrinking the line of defense, squeezing their space. The number of soldiers killed by the enemy was not as many as those burned to death. At this moment, Yuan Xian's face was ashen. He knew the enemy's plan. How sinister. Battle cries shook the heavens and corpses littered the field. Yuan Xian and his men's eyes were red from killing. After fighting for 2 hours, they finally successfully broke through the encirclement with the remaining soldiers from Xingqing South Road. In this battle, Yuan Xian lost 50% of his troops. Out of the 50%, 70% were burned to death. It was not easy to break through. Yuan Xian and his men naturally did not dare to stay. They led the defeated soldiers and escaped as fast as the wind. Li Yun led his troops and pretended to kill for a while, until the enemy's silhouette disappeared without a trace. Qiguan Rang held a feather fan in his right hand and a folded folding stool in his left. He looked in the direction where the enemy left. Chapter 1170. Li Yun said, "Then, there's finally an explanation." However, he looked at the battlefield with some pity. That was 50,000 dawn of military provisions, but now it was burnt to the ground. Fortunately, the military counselor had calculated the enemy's marching route, so they were able to stop the troop that intercepted the provisions in time. Now that they made the enemy bleed, it could be considered as atoning for their crime. Otherwise, he would be too ashamed to face his lord. Qiguan Rang frowned deeply. He did not agree with Li Yun's optimism. If it wasn't for the lord's use of the method of storing the provisions separately, building multiple granaries and grain lines, I'm afraid the loss today would be even greater. To save manpower and time, many feudal lords like to build a unified granary to store the military provisions in order to facilitate management. If Jiang Pengji chose to do the same, the troop that Huang Song sent to intercept the provisions would earn a lot. The provisions they intercepted and burned would not only be 50,000 dawn of grain, it could be 200,000 dawn or 300,000 dawn or even more. That was a month's worth of military provisions for 100,000 troops. What would the soldiers eat if they burned it all at once? How would they fight without provisions? A fall into the pit, a gain in your wit. Qiguan Rang said coldly, "If we fall into the same pit twice, what use would the Lord have for us?" Upon hearing his words, Li Yun's expression, which had relaxed with much difficulty, became serious again. Yes, Qiguan Rang was right. So what if they killed half of the enemy's troops? Those 50,000 dawn of grain were also burned clean by the enemy. What was there to be proud of? You're right, military counselor. Li Yun had a good temper. If it was another arrogant general who was lectured by Qiguan Rang, even if he did not show it on his face, he would be dissatisfied. In terms of status and authority in the army, the two were of the same level. What right did Qiguan Rang have to lecture him? If Qiguan Rang did not understand Li Yun's character, he would not have said such things and made himself a political enemy for no reason. Qiguan Rang and the rest returned to the camp. Just as they arrived, a soldier came forward to report that they had caught a suspicious person outside the camp who was spying on the camp. Because the identity reported by the person was suspicious, they did not dare to handle it on their own. They could only report to Qiguan Rang. Qiguan Rang raised his eyelids and asked coldly, "Suspicious person? Who? What was the identity of this person? How could the soldiers not know how to deal with him?" The soldier said, the person who came claimed to be the Lord's younger brother, and he had many private seals on him that could prove his identity. I didn't dare to deal with him without permission. The Lord's concubine brother? Qiguan Rang's mind raced. He was stunned for a while before he remembered who this person was. Wasn't that Lu Zhao? Although he was the Lord's younger brother, Lu Zhao was very tactful. He usually acted like a hedonistic son of a rich family and was not a threat at all. Qiguan Rang had been wary of Lu Zhao at first. He had even wondered if he should do something so that Lu Zhao would die prematurely in his prime so that he would not cause trouble for his lord. However, the lord did not allow it, and Lu Zhao had been very obedient all these years. Qiguan Rang could only suppress his restless heart. Bring him here, Qiguan Rang said. Whether it's San Lang or not, we'll know at a glance. When he saw Lu Zhao in a slightly sorry state, he was instantly speechless. He thought that someone was pretending to be Lu Zhao, but he didn't expect it to be him. San Lang Jun, why didn't you stay in Chongzhou? Why did you come to the front lines? Qiguan Rang signaled for the soldiers to loosen the bindings. Lu Zhao had a harmless, naive, and sweet aura. Now that he was tied up and carried over like a chicken, he looked even more pitiful. Quickly, untie him. Lu Zhao rubbed his hands that were slightly numb from being tied up. With a bitter expression, he said, Sir Qiguan, you're really strict with your troops. I almost lost my life. If it wasn't for the intelligence of the little boy beside me, who hurriedly revealed his identity, I'm afraid that I would have gone to the King of Hell to complain about my grievances. Qiguan Rang's expression did not change, but in his heart, he could not help but raise the butcher's knife. Without waiting for Qiguan Rang to react, Lu Zhao smiled and said, Sir, what I said just now was all nonsense. Please don't take it to heart. Spying on the camp is a serious crime. If I'm not careful and get shot into a hornet's nest, it's my own fault. You can't blame me, sir. Qiguan Rang furrowed his brows and used his eyes to ask Lu Zhao for the reason he came to the front lines. Lu Zhao saw that Qiguan Rang's expression was even colder and couldn't help but shiver. He begged, Sir, can you send some troops to Zhao? What does San Lang need troops for? Lu Zhao said, Of course it's to escort Zhao to see my sister. I have something important to tell her. Although the security in the north was good and it was peaceful, the closer they got to the war zone, the more chaotic it became. Lu Zhao was used to having exquisite clothing, food, shelter, and transportation. When he went out, he was obviously a child of wealth. Robbing him was the right thing to do. Therefore, he mustered up the courage to borrow troops from Qiguan Rang to escort him to see Jiangpengji. The front lines are dangerous and chaotic. San Lang shouldn't put himself in danger. Qiguan Rang advised, if San Lang has anything to say to the Lord, you can write a letter and send a horse to deliver it to the Lord. You'll get a reply in at most 3 days. This was already a compromise, but Lu Zhao refused to eat it. He shook his head and refused, still insisting on his own opinion. Qiguan Rang was speechless. What an infuriating spoilt brat. Lu Zhao said, It's not that I don't trust you, but this is a special matter. I have to tell my sister personally. Please tell me everything first. Qiguan Rang saw that Lu Zhao's expression was sincere and he even restrained his usual frivolous behavior. He faintly realized that the situation was serious. If that's the case, then I'll send 100 guards to escort San Lang to see the Lord. Lu Zhao's eyes shone brightly. He said happily, Thank you, sir, for fulfilling my wish. God knew how a pampered and spoiled son like him ran all the way here. He must have suffered a lot along the way. When Qiguan Rang sent Lu Zhao over, Jiangpengji was correcting military affairs. Why is he here? Lu Zhao howled as he ran into the tent from outside. He said without a care for his image, Sister, save me, Jiangpengji asked, There's a ghost chasing after you. You're crying and howling in broad daylight. Lu Zhao secretly wiped his tears. She was really his biological sister. Do you know there's a war now? If you're captured by the enemy scouts, you won't be able to keep your life. Jiang Pengji sternly reprimanded Lu Zhao. If Lu Zhao was taken as a hostage, she wouldn't be merciful. Get up. It's not proper to act like this. Lu Zhao pouted. Oh. Tell me. Why do you need me to save you? Can't you write a letter? Why do you have to come personally? Jiang Pengji asked. Lu Zhao looked around and said, Sister, can you dismiss the servants? So mysterious. Jiang Pengji didn't think that Lu Zhao had anything important to do. However, she still asked the soldiers in the tent to leave and turned off the live stream. Tell me. There's only the two of us in the tent now. There's no third person. Lu Zhao sat next to Jiang Pengji and squirmed. His expression was so weird that he looked like he had constipation for more than a month. Sister, father. Lu Zhao pulled his sleeves and hung his head. He wants me to get married. Jiang Pengji was speechless. Chapter 1171. You don't like it? Is it because the woman's family background is too low? Jiang Pengji frowned. Although Lu Zhao was the son of a concubine, marrying the daughter of a hunter, even if she had saved his life, was too unseemly. Lu Zhao's expression froze as if he wanted to say something. But when he saw Jiang Pengji's face, he swallowed his words. Do you think I'm someone who cares about my family background? Father liked that girl, and in order to make father smile, little brother married her, but... Lu Zhao said, but little brother has some reasons that others can't know, so I can't marry that girl. I definitely can't. Jiang Pengji glanced at Lu Zhao. Not enough for outsiders to understand? Lu Zhao avoided her gaze and awkwardly changed the topic. A few days ago, I went to visit Master Liaochen in Hejin County. I heard that Master Liaochen is a good friend of Min's mother. Jiang Pengji looked down and asked, and then? Lu Zhao laughed dryly. According to Great Master Liaochen, when Min's official mother was pregnant for the third time, she was disturbed by evil spirits due to the lack of yang energy in her body. She had no choice but to hide with Great Master Liaochen to find a way to get rid of the evil spirits. Sigh, it's a pity that the monastery is austere and not good for nurturing the fetus. After listening, Jiang Pengji further confirmed that there was a hidden meaning in Lu Zhao's words. He was probably really looking for him to ask for help. Mother's third pregnancy? Why don't I know about this? She pretended not to know. Aren't there only 2 times? Lu Zhao gulped nervously. Sister, don't scare little brother. If Jiang Pengji really didn't know about this, Lu Zhao wouldn't be seeking protection today. He would be courting death. Jiang Pengji did not tease him and continued to ask. What else do you have to say? Lu Zhao's eyes darted around and only spoke after a while. His words were also intermittent. This little brother has learned a lot of Zen philosophy from Master Liaochen. When she heard him talk about evil spirits, she asked him if there were really evil spirits in the world. What the great master said was true. Evil and humans existed side by side in the world. If the human body lacked yang energy, it was easy to be targeted by evil. As he spoke, Grandmaster began to talk about some interesting things. There's a story that left a deep impression on me. Jiang Pengji sneered at Lu Zhao. To be fair, Lu Zhao was truly pitiful. If not for his family background, he might have had some achievements. What story? A story passed down from the 16 Kingdoms period. Lu Zhao struggled internally for a while before he said hesitantly, it said that the soul of a certain noble goddess left her body and roamed the king of hell's palace at night. She was captured by the black and white impermanence, and the judge said that she couldn't return to the mortal world before her time was up. She refused to accept it and asked the judge why she was wrongly judged. The judge said that her body had already been taken over by a nameless wild ghost, but that wild ghost did not have the memories of a real noblewoman. Because the memories were attached to the soul, although there were remnants of the memories in the physical body, these memories only recognized the noble lady's soul. Unfortunately, in order to assume the identity of the noble woman, the wandering ghost lied to the noble woman's relatives that she had lost her memory and took the opportunity to take over her place. Lu Zhao's fingers were trembling as he told the story. He was afraid that Jiang Pengji would beat him up in the next second and kill him to silence him. Jiang Pengji did not make a move. "Ah, Zhao, are you saying I'm a nameless ghost?" Lu Zhao's face was pale as he shook his head. Even if he was given 10 guts, he wouldn't dare to openly provoke them. Although he didn't know who this sister of his was, Master Liaochen also said that he couldn't afford to offend her. Lu Zhao didn't have any interactions with the original Lu Shi. They weren't close siblings, but the person in front of him had taken care of him. Moreover, Lu Zhao thought about the truth he discovered not long ago. He felt a chill on his neck and couldn't sleep well at night. He was afraid that when he woke up the next day, his brain would move. He thought that his hidden identity could provide him with protection, but he didn't expect that he was also an abandoned chess piece on the surface. As an abandoned chess piece, there was no guarantee of his life. When the chess player felt that he had lost his value, he would only end up being abandoned. He cherished his life, and he wanted to live. After thinking about it, he still took Master Liaochen's suggestion and came all the way to Jiang Pengji. "Forget it, I'm not an unreasonable person. No matter what you know, if you want to live for a long time, it's better to continue pretending to be deaf and dumb. Even if you really become a pig, I'll allow you to live the rest of your life in luxury." Lu Zhao couldn't help but shiver. Concubine Dai was right. When the gods fought, a small shrimp like him didn't even have the qualifications to be cannon fodder. Lu Zhao laughed dryly. "Sister, I naturally believe in your words. I'll have to ask you to take care of my father." Jiang Pengji rolled her eyes at him. She rolled her eyes angrily. "If you're so afraid of my father, why did you dare to escape?" Lu Zhao said, "I had to choose the lesser of two evils. Didn't I have you to protect me?" Jiang Pengji said, "Stay in the camp and don't run around. The battle at the front line is serious. Don't add to the chaos." Lu Zhao secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He secretly glanced at Jiang Pengji's eyes. He wasn't sure if Jiang Pengji had received his hint. If she had, why was she so calm and unperturbed? Judging from her reaction, she seemed to have known the inside story for a long time. If she really knew, why could she pretend that nothing had happened? "What are you thinking about?" Jiang Pengji asked out of the blue. Lu Zhao blurted out. "Of course I'm thinking about you." "I'm thinking about why you're not afraid," Jiang Pengji said. "Superfluous feelings will blind people's eyes and cause them to be blind, so they can't see more concrete things." Lu Zhao asked in return, "So you don't have superfluous feelings?" "I don't have that, so I see far more things than you do. People will be afraid of the unknown, but things that they know won't." With that, Lu Zhao was even more certain of his guess. "It's getting late. You should go and rest first. I still have to deal with government affairs. Otherwise, I'll stay up until late at night again." Lu Zhao left tactfully. He left. Jiang Pengji didn't deal with government affairs according to his instructions. Instead, she stared at the god slayer on the sword rack in a daze. Suddenly, she asked in her heart. "System, Lu Shi didn't die, right?" According to Wei Si's revelation, Jiang Pengji didn't obtain the memories of the body's original owner. Because of the language barrier, she wandered outside. Just like the nameless wild ghost in the story, she couldn't obtain the body's memories because her soul didn't match. She could only pretend to have amnesia to deceive the body's relatives. Jiang Pengji was different. She had Lu Shi's memories. As long as she searched carefully, she could even find a lot of content that Lu Shi himself had forgotten. Before Lu Zhao told her the story, she could think that the system had helped. However, Lu Zhao came all the way here to tell her this. The weight was different. Lu Shi was very likely not dead. Thinking back carefully, Lu Shi's death was quite interesting. She was just frightened by the bandits. She stepped forward bravely to block a knife for Wei Jingxian. The knife cut her collar, but it didn't hurt her flesh. After that, Lu Shi had a high fever. After that, Jiang Pengji was pulled over by the system. Jiang Pengji's brain and spirit were strong. She could accurately sense if there was a strange second presence in a body. The conclusion was that Lu Shi's spirit had died. The death of his spirit meant complete death. Now. Chapter 1172. He didn't know if it was his imagination, but Qing Yuan felt that his lord had been very listless for the past 2 days. He was not the only one who felt this way. The viewers in the live broadcast room also realized that their energetic and disrespectful streamer had entered a strange, sleepy period. At first, they could still laugh and tease Jiang Pengji, but they didn't get a reply, so they felt something was wrong. Oshu, that. Did something bad happen to the host recently? Or was he bullied? Junpa, TSK, our streamer has always been a bully, right? Maybe it's because of my body? Chen Shirian, Auntie finally visited the streamer? Drink more hot water or brown sugar water. Don't be greedy for cold water. The audience scratched their ears and cheeks. Their way of showing concern was a little clumsy, but anyone with a discerning eye could see their sincerity. Compared to the audience's anxiety across the plain screen, it was more convenient for Qing Yuan to be her secretary. Qing Yuan asked, "Has the Lord encountered something troubling recently?" Jiang Pengji turned her head to look at him. She pursed her lips tightly and did not say a word. She only used her gaze to ask silently. Qing Yuan said with slight awkwardness, "I haven't seen you for the past 2 days. You're always in low spirits." Jiang Pengji leaned back in boredom and said indifferently, "Nothing. I'm just bored and too lazy to move." Qing Yuan thought about the hot weather outside and thought he had found a reason. "So it's Xia Yan." Jiang Pengji blinked and deliberately repeated, "No, I just find it boring." Qing Yuan was puzzled. "What's boring?" Jiang Pengji sighed in her heart. In the end, she did not speak her mind. She wanted to say, "Fighting for the world is too boring, I don't want to play anymore." If the strategists in the tent knew what she was thinking at this moment, they would probably explode in anger. Before this moment, she had never felt such a tired emotion, but now it was like a volcano that had been suppressed for a long time, suddenly erupting. She asked Qing Yuan, "If there is someone in this world who is exactly the same as me, would Gong Liao recognize the wrong lord?" Qing Yuan was even more confused. He could not figure out the meaning behind Jiang Pengji's question and could only answer carefully. How can an ordinary person imitate the Lord? Even if they looked exactly the same, could they imitate the exact same temperament and behavior? "I'm loyal to my Lord. If I can't even tell my Lord apart, then I won't have the face to live in this world." When Qing Yuan finished speaking, he was magnanimous. Jiang Pengji smiled. It was a rare smile for the past 2 days. "You're right. I'm the most unique person in this world. Not just anyone can replace me." Qing Yuan couldn't help but let his imagination run wild. His lord wasn't someone who liked to be sad and sad. There must be a reason for her sudden depression. His expression suddenly became solemn. Could it be that someone has harbored evil intentions and is trying to use the technique of substituting master? When he blurted out these words, Qing Yuan was also shocked by his own imagination. Although it's not the target, it's not far. Jiang Pengji's answer horrified Qing Yuan. "Wait a minute, how is this possible? Who has such ambition?" Qing Yuan's eyes revealed a murderous intent. He already had the intention to kill the unknown target. As long as Jiang Pengji told him who that person was, Qing Yuan would dig him out and kill him even if he had to dig 3 feet into the ground. "My lord, this matter concerns your safety. If you know anything, don't hide it, lest you give the villain an opportunity to take advantage of." In all fairness, Qing Yuan didn't quite believe that this would happen. One's appearance could be faked, but how could one's temperament, habits, and memories be faked? Jiang Pengji had been with the officials in the tent for many years. They didn't dare to say that they completely understood their lord, but it was impossible for them to not know anything. If an impostor wanted to replace her, it wouldn't take long before the truth was revealed. In this way, was there still value in substituting master? Qing Yuan was suspicious and worried, but his lord was smiling so easily that he didn't know what to do. Ha ha ha, I'm just teasing you. It's just that I had a very realistic dream a few days ago. I found out that a demon copied my memory and took over my body. He took the opportunity to blend in with you. I couldn't tell the difference between a dream and reality for a while. I've been paranoid for the past 2 days and scared you instead. It's my fault. Jiang Pengji laughed and tried to deal with Qing Yuan. However, she was very clear in her heart whether this was a joke or not. Lu Zhao hinted that the real Lu Shi was still alive, so she knew that things were not that simple. She could obtain the memory of the original Lu Shi with the help of the system. Who knew if the original could obtain her memory from the system? Because Jiang Pengji guarded against the system and protected the memory of the brain very well, the memory system before her transmigration could not be hacked and copied. The memory after her transmigration was uncertain. As long as the memory was copied, when she unified the world, the system would then give the recorded memory to the original Lu Shi. Then, who knew if that Lu Shi could perfectly replace her? The purpose of the system was clear from the beginning to the end. It wanted an important source of energy, not only the popularity of the streaming room, but also the luck that could not be understood. According to the saying of ancient times, those who were blessed with luck were people with great luck, such as the emperor or other members of the royal family. Therefore, the system instigated Jiang Pengji to strive for the path of becoming an empress in the palace. The empress or the women in the harem were the existence closest to the emperor. It was very convenient for the system to seize luck. However, Jiang Pengji did not play her cards according to common sense. She wanted to be the emperor herself and conveniently diss the two systems. The system could only find another way. Didn't she want to be the emperor? Then the system would cultivate a puppet that could perfectly replace her and help her become the emperor. It would be more convenient and unscrupulous to absorb luck. She thought that the spirit of the original Lu Shi had completely disappeared. The system had also given her such a misleading message. But she did not think of another possibility. Perhaps the original Lu Shi had not disappeared, but was imprisoned somewhere by the system? If the original Lu Shi was used as a trump card to deal with her, it would be a very good card. It would definitely be able to catch her unprepared. Analyzing from all aspects, substituting the original Lu Shi was the most efficient method. If Lu Zhao had not secretly informed her, Jiang Pengji would have taken a long time to realize this. Thinking of this, she could not help but frown. She felt that fighting for the world was boring and depressed. It was not that she was afraid of the person behind the scenes, but she did not like people coveting her achievements. She was the one who dug the pit, she was the one who cultivated the saplings, she was the one who fertilized, killed the insects, and pollinated the crops. After all this work, the fruits that were about to ripen were plucked by someone else. The bully had already come to her doorstep. Was she not allowed to explode? If she could, she really wanted to break the jar and ask the person behind the scenes to come out and fight for the bean-sized farm. She would not accompany him. Her depressed mood did not last long. Soon, she was stimulated by a battle report. Quickly prepare the troops and horses. They did not know how to pick a day to fight a war. Chapter 1173. Speaking of that day, Qiguan Rang had forced Yuan Xian's army to retreat and caused them heavy losses. Yuan Xian had successfully escaped with his defeated army, like a stray dog. Although they had successfully burned 50,000 dawn of the enemy's rations, they had paid the price of half the casualties. As the commander, Yuan Xian's crime was unforgivable. Yuan Xian's personality was more impulsive and he had made many enemies. Those people took advantage of this opportunity to kick him when he was down. Who asked Yuan Xian to be so arrogant and make such a military pledge? Yuan Xian was a person with high aspirations, an arrogant personality, and strong self-esteem. He was usually respected by others. When had he ever been pushed down by others? For a moment, he couldn't suppress his grief and anger. He said, "This is indeed my fault, but I am not willing to accept punishment. The main culprit is someone else." Huang Song subconsciously furrowed his brows. He wanted to punish Yuan Xian heavily to clean up the atmosphere, but if he did that, it would inevitably disappoint the old general. He was already in a difficult situation. He didn't expect Yuan Xian to say something like this. What did he mean by, "the main culprit is someone else"? Before Huang Song could find an excuse to send Yuan Xian away, Yuan Xian said, "I suspect that someone has colluded with the enemy and leaked information." Colluded with the enemy and leaked information? Hearing these words, Huang Song's ears couldn't help but perk up. What do you mean colluded with the enemy and leaked information? Thinking of Yuan Xian's usual personality, Huang Song felt that this old fellow's words couldn't be completely trusted. Yuan Xian pointed. Everyone looked in the direction he was pointing and were all shocked. Everyone had different reactions. Nie Sun was about to explode. He couldn't help but stand up and scold, "Yuan Xian, if you are afraid of punishment, just say it. Why do you have to accuse me?" He was really angry. His usual gentle demeanor were all thrown to the back of his head. The veins on his forehead were bulging. Yuan Xian said, "That day, when I volunteered to go out to intercept the rations, do you still remember what you said?" Nie Sun was stunned. What did he say? Yuan Xian said, "You said that I don't know much about the terrain in Hu County. If you let me lead the army and we fail to intercept the grain, we'll be surrounded and fall into the enemy's trap. How can I escape? Why didn't I know that you, Nie Qingyun, had the ability to predict the future? It's no secret that you and I don't get along. This old man also made you lose face, causing you to lose the chance to recommend a new general and form a clique for personal gain. It's hard to guarantee that you, Nie Qingyun, won't harbor a grudge in your heart in order to frame this old man and secretly use underhanded methods." Nie Sun scolded angrily, "What kind of bullshit are you spouting? Did they really think that he, Nie Sun, wouldn't swear? Did they really think that he was made of clay and didn't have a temper?" After saying that, Nie Sun even drew his sword from his waist. If it weren't for the fact that a few of his colleagues saw that the situation was getting out of hand and stopped him, he would have really taken up his sword and fought with Yuan Xian alone. Being able to beat him was secondary. The main point was that he absolutely could not endure this humiliation. Yuan Xian sneered, "Could it be that you're angry out of humiliation?" Huang Song's patience with Yuan Xian had also run out. He couldn't help but say, "Victory and defeat are common in military affairs. Commandant Yuan, don't be obsessed." In other words, he wanted Yuan Xian to be more open-minded and not go around biting people after losing a game. Even if Huang Song didn't really trust Nie Sun, it was really unsightly for Yuan Xian to go around biting people like a mad dog. Yuan Xian, however, didn't understand the meaning behind it. Instead, he thought that Huang Song was comforting him. He had the right to think so. Huang Song needed the support of his family, so he was more tolerant and kind to the generals who came from his family. Yuan Xian said, "Why didn't my lord investigate the route and terrain of the south road of Xing City in Hu County? Even if the troops under Lu Shi's tent were divine soldiers, if there wasn't an early warning and no one colluded with the enemy, how could they mobilize troops to the exit of the south road of Xing City in such a short time and set up an ambush in advance? Even if they arrived, they would be a tired army, and it would be even more impossible for them to kill half of their troops." It had to be said that Yuan Xian's rhythm was indeed very good. It was almost perfect. Except for a few strategists who found the loopholes in his words, the others all believed in Yuan Xian's imagination and speculation. At first, it really sounded like it. Seeing this, Nye Sun was so angry that he blacked out and fainted. Everyone was so scared that they panicked again. At this time, Feng Zhu wasn't present, so only Qing Jing could say a few words of justice for Nye Sun. "Old Commandant Yuan, you're wrong," Qing Jing said with a cold face. "The enemy is familiar with the terrain of Hu County, so it's not a problem for them to take a shortcut. After a rapid march, they can indeed reach the south road of Xing City in advance and set up an ambush. They are tired soldiers, but the old commandant didn't notice. They only know how to break out of the encirclement, but they don't know how to react. Why do they only defend and not attack? Isn't it to disturb our army's morale and make the old commandant lose his rationality and sense of propriety? Most of the soldiers who died were not killed by sharp blades, but by fire. Old commandant, you can't even see through this?" No one knew that ever since Nye Sun fainted from being bitten by Yuan Xian, Qing Jing had the intention to kill him. Keeping such a person around would cause more conflicts between the civil and military officials under the Lord's command. Sooner or later, there would be a big mess. Huang Song couldn't stand it anymore. He called for a military doctor for Nye Sun and told Yuan Xian to go away and reflect on his actions. He would punish Nye Sun after he woke up. "My lord, we can't indulge old Commandant Yuan anymore." Qing Jing had a headache. After today, Nye Sun and Huang Song would definitely have a complete separation. Even if they didn't, Nye Sun wouldn't be as selfless and loyal as before. Huang Song heard the complaint in Qing Jing's words. What was there to complain about? Complaining that Huang Song was biased towards his own family and treated others poorly. This would only cause the officials to have a different opinion and gradually alienate them from the Lord. Huang Song hardened his heart and said, "I will give Qing Yun an explanation." Qing Jing could only hope that it was not too late to salvage the situation. Who would have thought that the conflict between Yuan Xian and Nye Sun would escalate from a trivial matter to such a serious one? When Nye Sun woke up, Huang Song held his little hand and said a bunch of intimate words. Nye Sun maintained a weak smile the whole time and occasionally responded. Other than himself, no one knew what he was thinking. There were still cracks in a broken mirror, let alone a person's heart. Under Yuan Xian's various death-seeking efforts, Nye Sun developed a deep animosity towards Huang Song. Fortunately, they still had a common enemy to deal with. For the time being, they didn't have the energy to engage in any internal strife. The conflict between the people under Huang Song's command was also temporarily diverted because of the war. South Xingqing intercepted the rations. Our side suffered heavy casualties and the enemy lost 50,000 don of rations. It was barely considered a draw. Huang Song was about to prepare for the next step when he suddenly received a secret letter from Su Bei. In this war, Su Bei was the main force. Huang Song was only a support. Su Bei's troops and Jiang Pengji's troops fought on the Sichuan plains to attract the main force. He requested Huang Song to bypass the main force and launch a sneak attack on Hu County. Although Jiang Pengji had a few supply lines, they were all concentrated in Hu County. Once Hu County was lost and the rations were cut off, their side would gain the upper hand. Chapter 1174. Qing Jing lowered his eyelids slightly and said solemnly, "My lord previously sent old Lieutenant Yuan to attack the grain supply line in Hu County. Although he succeeded in burning the enemy's 50,000 don of grain, he also alerted the enemy. How could Lu Shi let his guard down? Now that we're using the same trick again, I'm afraid the effect will be minimal." With regards to Su Bei's request, Qing Jing didn't think highly of it. Su Bei and Jiang Pengji's battle at Sichuan Plain had indeed attracted the attention of most of the troops, but this didn't mean that Huang Song could easily infiltrate the enemy's rear without any risk. The long-distance march was secondary. They were afraid that Jiang Pengji would react quickly and cut off Huang Song's main force's retreat. Hu County was a major grain-producing county. It was also the main supply channel for Jiang Pengji's army. How could it be unguarded? It was true that Huang Song and Su Bei had formed an alliance, but they wouldn't go so far as to put themselves in a perilous situation for an ally. This seemed like an easy job, but in reality, it was hard work without any benefits. No one knew who had given Su Bei such an idea. This was too much of a trap for their allies. It wasn't that Huang Song didn't understand Qing Jing's words. However, this was the first time he was working with Su Bei in an alliance. It wasn't good to shirk responsibility. They had formed an alliance because of their interests and standpoint. There was no basis for trust at all. This relationship seemed strong, but in reality, it was very fragile. Without any basis of trust, this meant that the outside world could split their alliance from the inside as long as there were enough benefits. Even if they couldn't be divided, the so-called alliance would be useless. That's true, but how do we get rid of this without hurting our friendship? Huang Song asked him. Qing Jing said, either you tell us the truth, or you send troops to pretend to attack Hu County. Told the truth? Huang Song couldn't react for a moment. Qing Jing said, of course it's about the original commandant intercepting the rations. Huang Song had already mobilized troops to rob their grain supply. If he were to rob them again in a short period of time, would they be defenseless? This wasn't a sneak attack, it was a suicidal attack. Huang Song frowned awkwardly, but he didn't directly say yes or no. At the same time, the Sichuan plain was also in full swing. Jiang Pengji had conquered the northern borderline and Sangzhou. She could be considered wealthy and overbearing. She had built up another batch of cavalry in a short period of time. The terrain of the Sichuan plains was wide, and it was extremely suitable for cavalry to roam and scatter, or for heavy cavalry to charge and cut through. She had never been stingy with her family's private treasury. Not to mention her wife's money, she had even taken out her coffin money to strengthen the army. The moment the two armies clashed, Su Bei was undoubtedly at a disadvantage. Regardless of whether it was a head-on clash or a mobile battle, he wasn't a match for them. Han Yu, who was at home and refused to see any visitors, couldn't sit still when he heard about this. Lu Shi owns 2 major horse farms in the northern borderline and Sangzhou. He has plenty of warhorses under his command. Who gave you the courage to fight him in the Sichuan plain? When Han Yu received the news, he was boiling tea in the courtyard. He was so angry that he knocked over the teapot and almost scalded his hand. Upon further investigation, they discovered that this foolish idea had actually been suggested by one of Su Pei's strategists. If we can defeat the enemy army head-on, our morale will be greatly boosted. Han Yu also knew this counselor. The counselor was well versed in theory, but he had almost zero practical experience. He could be considered as another armchair strategist. At the same time, the other party also gave his own reasons. At first glance, those reasons sounded quite reasonable. It was not that the strategist had not thought about the problem of cavalry, but Jiang Pengji had conquered Sangzhou for less than half a year and conquered the northern borderline for only a year. How strong could a cavalry troop be built in such a short time? The cost of training cavalry was very high. Not only did it burn money, but it also consumed a lot of time. Moreover, no matter how strong the cavalry was, as long as there were not many of them, it would not be difficult to deal with them. Excluding the advantage of cavalry, the combat strength of the two sides should not be too different. Sichuan Plain was their main battlefield, so it was not impossible for them to win. Su Pei and the others had thought of everything. The only thing they did not consider was the time Jiang Pengji had spent on training the cavalry. In order to deal with the northern borderline, she had started the formation of the cavalry battalion a few years ago. It was not a year or half a year like everyone thought. During the battle at the northern borderline, the number of cavalry under her command was not large. It was not because she was hiding her strength, but because she did not have enough warhorses. After conquering the northern borderline and Sangzhou, the number of warhorses increased, and the cavalry battalion suddenly expanded several times. After losing the first battle, Su Pei had no choice but to send someone to pull out Han Yu, who was squatting at home and planting mushrooms. As soon as Han Yu came over, he asked Su Pei to withdraw his troops and choose to retreat to the mountain pass. This was to suppress the cavalry's advantage. The cavalry was not omnipotent, but ordinary infantry needed a lot of preparation to fight against cavalry. They also needed to coordinate with the terrain to be effective. For example, in mountainous areas, forests, and valleys, the cavalry's combat strength and survival ability would be greatly reduced. The terrain of Chi-Chuan Plain was vast. It was simply a paradise for cavalry. Not to mention that Lu Shi had the heavy cavalry battalion under his command. No matter how strong their defense was, they would not be able to withstand the joint attack of thousands of heavy cavalry. Instead of choosing to fight head-on, it was better to retreat and use the terrain to stabilize the military situation. Han Yu was cautious by nature. If this battle had been handed to him from the beginning, even if he did not know the strength of the enemy, he would have chosen the safest way to fight. After stabilizing the situation, he would then think of ways to expand the results of the battle. Blindly greedy would only cause him to be consigned to eternal damnation. His choice was a harsh slap to the face of the previous strategist. However, Su Pei valued Han Yu so much that he could not even speak sarcastically. Han Yu did not know how the other party felt. He was only concerned about the situation of the battlefield, such as the losses in the previous battle. When Su Pei withdrew his troops and retreated to defend, Yang Si knew that Han Yu had come out again. Isn't he at home closing his door to guests? Is that a disguised form of confinement? Han Yu was Yang Si's nemesis. Yang Si had no temper at all when faced with this fellow. Qin Gong said, Han Yu is Su Bei's most trusted strategist. The two of them had a small conflict, but it will not be a stalemate forever. Ordinary couples fight at the head of the bed and reconcile at the end, not to mention the importance of this battle. Even if Han Yu has a grudge against him, he will not sit idly by. Yang Si, who was originally burning with anger, could not say a word. Qin Gong's honest analogy made him feel like he could not bear to look straight at it. Yang Si did not speak. Qin Gong asked again, strategist, is it possible that I have said something wrong? No. Yang Si put down his hand and coughed softly. It makes sense. Qin Gong asked, what should we do now? Su Bei's army has retreated and the surrounding area is filled with forests and hills. If Su Bei and his men were to stay here, the combat strength of the cavalry would be equivalent to being crippled unless they found a way to lure them out. Of course, the other way was to attack by force. This would increase the number of casualties. Just as Yang Si was hesitating, the messenger sent news that their lord had dispatched troops to the front line. Yang Si, no way, their lord had finally settled down for a while. Why did she suddenly run to the front line? If their lord wanted to show off in the battle, how could he dissuade her? I'm done for, Yang Si mumbled. Qin Gong asked, what's done for? I'm done for. Chapter 1175. Yang Si didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt that something was wrong with his lord these 2 days. She was like a firecracker that would explode at the slightest touch. Feng Jing, how do you feel after following the lord to attack the city for the past 2 days? Yang Si did not dare to ask Jiang Pengji directly, so he tried to get information from Qin Gong in private. Qin Gong was silent for a moment. He thought of how his lord had charged into battle and couldn't help but shiver. Only after a long while did he speak hesitantly. My lord is a true man. Yang Si, Bulsh *T, isn't this something that everyone knows? Who asked you about this? Yang Si asked, don't you think that lord has been particularly angry recently? Usually, they did not reveal themselves and looked very normal. However, when they fought, they were several times more ferocious than before. They fought without any regard for their lives. Although they did not manage to break through Su Bei's army's defensive line, after 2 consecutive days, Su Bei's defense seemed to be straining. Qin Gong asked hesitantly, really? I have only been with His Highness for a short period of time and do not understand him as well as the military counselor. After saying that, the upright young general revealed an ashamed expression, as if he had committed a grave mistake. Yang Si said, "Our Lord is not like this usually. She knows when to stop fighting. If she can avoid getting hurt, she will." Unlike now, Qin Gong, it turned out that in the eyes of his military counselor Yang, the Lord's arm being scratched by a stray arrow was also considered an injury. It was really just a scratch on the arm. He had seen it before. The wound was as long as a pinky finger. It was shallow and only the skin was scratched. Yang Si's worries were not unreasonable. Jiang Pengji indeed vented her negative emotions through the war. She had killed to her heart's content, but it was a pity for those who had died under her blade. None of them had a complete corpse. The god-slaying blade had a unique origin. It was a weapon that was on par with the Federation's marshal's blade. It could easily slice through space armors, much less a human body. She killed for a while until her arm was scratched by a stray arrow. A slight pain came from her arm, and she calmed down. No matter what happened to the original, Lu Shi, the owner of this body was her, not anyone else. If Lu Shi wanted to take back his body, Jiang Pengji would not be so thick-skinned as to forcefully occupy it. But if she had the idea of reaping the fruits of victory and forcefully taking over everything that did not belong to her, then she could not blame Jiang Pengji for being ruthless. Jiang Pengji recovered from her low spirits and returned to her usual self. His main focus now was to conquer the world and take over the entire farm as soon as possible. By then, the people hiding in the dark would jump out. What could be more frustrating than being knocked down from the peak when you were about to win? Jiang Pengji had never been a kind person. Since he had offended her to death, then don't blame her for being ruthless and taking revenge. She was able to restrain her ambition and climb her way up from a genetic warrior to the position of the commander of an entire army. How could she not have some patience? Nothing was important, as long as she was the final winner. Jiang Pengji confronted Su Pei at the front lines. The group quietly departed from Hejin County and headed north to Chongzhou. When Gu Zhen appeared in front of Madame Hu, the latter was stunned. "Why didn't you stay in Hejin County to recuperate? Why did you come here?" Madame Hu was dressed in plain clothes. Even though she had no makeup on, her natural charm was enough to make all the women in the world jealous. "He put you under house arrest?" Gu Zhen frowned and looked around at the decorations in the house. It was cold and bleak. Madame Hu said, "Isn't it obvious? Why did he do that?" The second madam did not understand. "It's because I let Zhao escape. He wanted him to marry a hunter's daughter. Zhao doesn't like it, and neither do I," and Madame Hu sneered. Her plump red lips were cold. "Just because of this reason, he locked me up here." Gu Zhen's expression was very solemn. "How could this be?" Madame Hu said, "Why not? Lanting hasn't even unified Dongqing yet, and he already thinks of himself as the emperor." Faced with Madame Hu's sarcasm, the second madam said, "Bai Dai." Madame Hu said, "Humph, are you here to persuade him?" The second madam said, "Of course not. I think you've misunderstood something." "Shut up, Gu Zhen." Madame Hu was so angry that she stood up and glared at the second madam. She sneered and said arrogantly, "I've said it before. Don't mess around in front of me. She's just the daughter of a concubine who stole Gu Min's status. I don't need you to interfere with what I do." The two of them did not have a good relationship. They could maintain a facade in front of outsiders, but once there was no one around, they would completely reveal their true colors. Gu Zhen's expression changed. She said, "I really don't know what's wrong with you. Why have you treated Lu Shi like this all these years?" She still remembered that Bai Dai and Lu Shi had a good relationship. They were childhood sweethearts and cousins. After Lu Shi married Gu Min, the two of them rarely contacted each other. Later, Bai Dai became Lu Shi's concubine. Logically speaking, the two of them should have been closer, but now they were like enemies. There was almost no buffer time for such a big change. It was as if everything had changed overnight. You don't need to care about this. Madame Hu's attitude was overbearing and unreasonable. Gu Zhen said, if it wasn't for my sister, I wouldn't have cared about you. Madame Hu said, don't be so arrogant. You can say nice things, but you still have to snatch. Can you refute that? There were a few things that she hated the most in her life. One of them was that Gu Zhen had replaced Gu Min as Lu Shi's legal wife. Although Lu Shi was not a good person, only Gu Min was worthy of the position of legal wife. Gu Zhen did not want to be entangled with Madame Hu on this issue. The two of them had argued over this issue more than 100 times. Gu Zhen said, I know your temperament. There must be a reason why your attitude towards Lu Shi changed so much. I asked you before, but you always refused to tell me. Now that your relationship with Lu Shi is so strained, are you still going to hide it from me? Does this have anything to do with my sister? Madame Hu said, if I said that Gu Min did not die of illness, but was strangled by Lu Shi with a white silk, would you believe me? Gu Zhen's eyes widened and her mind went blank when she suddenly tossed out a huge bomb. Bai Dai, what did Bai Dai say? Are you kidding me? How could brother-in-law use a white silk too? This was simply the biggest joke in the world. Why not? I saw it with my own eyes. Although I didn't see the person, I saw the shadow through the door and window. It was indeed Lu Shi who strangled her with a white silk. Gu Zhen finally revealed the secret that she had suppressed for more than 10 years. The next day, Lu Shi pretended that nothing had happened. He even pretended to show such a disgusting expression, as if he was really in love with Gu Min *T. It was all fake. Gu Zhen really wanted to say something, but the door outside suddenly opened. The two of them heard the movement and turned their heads in unison. They saw a middle-aged man in a scholar's robe standing at the door. Chapter 1176. Lu Shi's appearance was too sudden. The atmosphere suddenly dropped to a freezing point. Both Bai Dai and Xiaochen felt a sense of fear and helplessness from the bottom of their hearts. However, Bai Dai quickly calmed down. She sneered at the food box in Lu Shi's hand and said sarcastically, how long have you been standing outside? Do you want to give me my last meal and then use that white silk to choke me to death like how you strangled Gu Min? Lu Shi's eyes were dark and gloomy. In the past, Lu Shi was always warm, like the warm sun in spring. He didn't make people feel hot or cold. He was neither hot nor cold, just right. His eyes were also slightly pale. Under the light, they had a kind of amber texture, but now they were like black ink, giving people an inexplicable coldness. Uncharacteristically, Lu Shi didn't speak. Instead, he stared coldly at Bai Dai. Gu Zhen, who was standing beside him, calmed down. Fear grew in her heart. Is what Bai Dai said true? Gu Zhen suppressed the urge to shake her hands and stared at Lu Shi's expression. Sister, did you really strangle her with a piece of white silk? Why did you do that? What reason do you have to do that? Lu Zhongqing, say something. After a while, Lu Shi stepped into the room and raised his right hand to put the food box on the table. His tone was flat as he spoke to Bai Dai. You're possessed. I saw it with my own eyes. You're saying I'm possessed? Lu Shi, if you're a man, just admit it. Why are you denying it? Since they had already fallen out, Bai Dai didn't want to pretend anymore. God knew how hard it had been for her all these years. Every time she saw Lu Shi's affectionate face, she wanted to scratch him. Don't you know what happens to a person's body if they were strangled with white silk? Lu Shi's reaction was very calm. He could even rationally point out the loopholes in Madame Hu's words. You should know what happens to Gu Min's body. There are no traces of her being strangled with white silk. Gu Min and I loved each other very much. She just gave birth to a child for me. What reason do I have to kill my wife? Bai Dai was furious. The second madam saw Lu Shi's reaction and took a few steps back in fear. Lu Shi refuted the fact that he had killed his wife, but his reaction proved that he was right. Think about it, if Lu Shi really loved Gu Min to the core, how could he be so calm when he suddenly found out about this absurd thing? Gu Zhen did not dare to accept this fact, but Bai Dai was so angry that she raised her hand and slapped her. Lu Shi, you are the most disgusting person I have ever met in my life. The expected sound didn't come. Instead, her wrist was accurately grabbed by Lu Shi, like an iron clamp. Lu Shi didn't use much strength, but Bai Dai screamed in pain and almost fainted. Her wrist was almost crushed. I didn't kill Ah Min. If you keep spouting nonsense, I'm afraid I'll have to resort to some extreme measures. Lu Shi raised his hand and flung her wrist away. Then, he stood up gracefully and prepared to leave. Lu Zhongqing, when you ignored her pleas for mercy and personally strangled her, were you happy? Lu Shi's silhouette froze. He turned his head to look at Bai Dai and said, I didn't kill Ah Min. She died of illness. You have to remember that. Gu Zhen shuddered involuntarily. She still couldn't accept what was happening in front of her. Bai Dai sneered, if you don't want people to know, then don't do it. You might be able to fool a 3-year-old, but do you think I'm blind? Let's not talk about Ah Min first. Why did you let Zhao marry a hunter's daughter from nowhere? What are you thinking? Lu Shi said, her father once saved Ah Min's life. What's wrong with letting Zhao marry his daughter and take care of her for the rest of her life? Bai Dai said, Lu Zhongqing, that is Ah Min's only surviving son. How could you humiliate him like this? You wanted to treat him as a bastard son and treat him like a bastard son. I agreed, but I didn't dare to get close to him. Now you want to ruin the rest of his life? Lu Shi said, I did it for his own good. Bai Dai sneered, for his own good? You did it for his own good. Your solution was to make him a lowly bastard son. Now he is being suppressed by a lonely soul of unknown origin. Lu Shi is your daughter. You know that the so-called 2 souls in one body are fake, but you can still accept a lonely soul without any grudge. Don't you feel sorry for your daughter? What she really wanted to ask was whether Lu Shi was still human. Lu Shi said, one day, you will understand. I don't understand. I only believe the truth that I see for myself. You killed your wife and Gu Min. You abandoned your daughter and let the evildoer take over her body and get away with it. You made the honorable son of Lu Shi a bastard and raised him to be useless. Lu Zhongqing, what are your intentions? Bai Dai's words were full of blood, but Lu Shi didn't seem to hear it. I told you, you don't understand. You devil. Bai Dai had a bad temper. She had always been unmoved by force or persuasion. Lu Shi's words didn't work at all. Instead, it triggered the resistance that she had suppressed for many years. She covered her rapidly red and swollen wrist and said angrily, Lu Shi, who was as beautiful as the moon, died a long time ago. Where did you come from, evildoer? You caused the death of Gu Min's family. Are you still not satisfied? Yes. Lu Shi was the evildoer. Bai Dai's chest rose and fell violently. Her emotions were completely out of control. If the second madam hadn't come back to her senses and stopped her, she would have pounced on Lu Shi. You too. Lu Shi finally turned around and looked at the two of them. His eyes were still cold. Let me calm down. After saying that, Lu Shi left without looking back. His footsteps sounded as if he was fleeing for his life. Let me go. After Lu Shi left, Bai Dai finally lost her temper and pushed the second madam aside. Do you want to die? The second madam stopped her. If you continue to provoke him, he might really kill you. He's not a man if he doesn't kill me. I don't expect him to spare my life if he dares to kill his beloved wife. Bai Dai was still emotional, but the second madam refused to let her go. The two of them could only stand there in a stalemate. What was Lu Shi doing at that moment? He staggered back to his study and slammed the door. He fell to the ground as if he had used up all his strength. His forehead was covered in sweat. As time passed, he curled up into a ball. The veins on his forehead bulged. It was terrifying. Do you really think you are Lu Shi? I'm not satisfied with your performance today. Lu Shi's eyes were closed. He breathed hot air through his nose and mouth as if he had fallen asleep. How did Gu Min die? Correct your position and identity. You have no right to question me like this. I'll ask you again. How did Gu Min die? Because of Lu Shi's resistance, the voice in his head was silent for a while before it spoke again. I said she was an outsider. She was destined to be rejected by the plane's consciousness and return to her own world. Bai Dai said you strangled her with my body. Chapter 1177. Lu Shi clenched his fists. He bit his pale lips so hard that they started to bleed. The voice was refuting his explanation, but Lu Shi knew that what Bai Dai said was mostly true. You wanted to kill Bai Dai. If I didn't stop you, they would have been strangled by you. Lu Shi looked calm and said indifferently, if there was no inside story behind Ah Min's death, why did you try to kill her? Why? The voice in his head didn't respond. Lu Shi said to himself, she was just an ordinary person. Gu Zhen and the others couldn't accept the truth, and neither could Lu Shi. If the truth was wrong from the beginning, then wouldn't his years of planning be a joke? Bai Dai's questions rang in Lu Shi's ears. His mind was shaken and he almost choked. An ordinary person? If she was an ordinary person, she wouldn't have the ability to seduce you and me. You disappoint me. You and I are one, and we are complete when we are together. Now you want to be independent because of an ordinary woman. That's great. Lu Shi clenched his fists. His blood was boiling, and his mind was full of complicated thoughts. Isn't this your problem? Lu Shi said, feelings are always changeable and uncontrollable factors. Lu Shi remembered clearly that he knew a lot of things from the moment he was born, but there was always a force that made him develop into a playboy. Ever since he met Gu Min, he was confused about what he wanted. However, Gu Min was the daughter of the Gu family and one of the two beauties of Langya. She was not someone he could match. Even though they were childhood sweethearts by marriage, the elders in his family never thought of letting him be with Gu Min. Lu Shi wanted to work hard, but at the same time, he was controlled by the strange force to stay away from the study and indulge in fun. It wasn't until 2 years before Gu Min's marriage proposal that Lu Shi met an immortal. He was coaxed to eat a magical elixir, and suddenly remembered everything. He was ordered to impersonate Lu Shi, but he didn't go through the proper process of reincarnation, so his memory was forcibly sealed by the plane's consciousness. Lu Shi didn't feel relieved when his memory was restored. Instead, he became more and more afraid. This kind of fear reached its peak with the death of the 2 eldest sons. According to history, Lu Shi never had a legitimate son. You and Gu Min are both imposters. Would your legitimate son be allowed to exist? Lu Shi knew that the consciousness of the plane would eliminate the anomalies in order to protect its own interests. Looking at his clever daughter, Lu Shi felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. If the 2 legitimate sons could not stand, then the legitimate daughter in front of him, who had both soul and soul, this body was specially prepared by the plane's consciousness for the child of destiny. Now, it has been taken by your daughter. Do you know that? The familiar voice was like a death knell, causing Lu Shi to be immersed in fear at every moment. Lu Shi was at a loss. What should I do? Tell me, what should I do? Let's go with the flow and wait patiently for the child of providence to come. Only by absorbing enough, will you be able to save their souls. Wait for the son of providence? Didn't this mean that the daughter would? Lu Shi wanted to say something but stopped. His heart was filled with an unprecedented disgust and worry. However, he didn't dare to show it. Seeing that Gu Min was pregnant with her 3rd child and that she was smiling again, he heaved a sigh of relief. If he followed the flow of history, Ah Min's child, regardless of whether it was a boy or a girl, had to be born of a concubine. This should be able to deceive the plane's consciousness and also send away the stupid and greedy time traveler. He thought that everything would develop in a good direction, but unexpectedly, Gu Min's body rapidly weakened after giving birth and she died soon after. No matter how Lu Shi investigated, he could only find out that Gu Min's death had something to do with the time traveler who had taken over Wang Huiyun's body. Lu Shi chose to reincarnate as a human, so he lost the convenience and ability of his original race. In order to take revenge, he adopted Wang Huiyun and Prince Changshou's daughter as a concubine's daughter, named her Lu Huan, and set out to take revenge. It wasn't just Wang Huiyun, the child of providence, but also the malicious plane's consciousness. Lu Shi often wondered what Gu Min had done wrong. It wasn't her original intention to time travel. After she time traveled, she behaved herself and didn't do anything out of line. Even though she was different from the original Gu Min, what she did was beneficial to the original history and not harmful to the future child of providence. Compared to the entire plane, she wasn't even a speck of dust. Why couldn't it tolerate her? Lu Shi knew that the plane's consciousness had the ability to repel outsiders. Once an ordinary soul like Gu Min, who had no background, was caught, she would be sent back to her original plane at best, or her soul would be destroyed. The decades of comfortable life made him forget the danger. The only fortunate thing was that Gu Min's soul wasn't destroyed. She was just sent back the way she came. If Lu Shi wanted to find her, not only would he have to accurately locate her from countless planes, but he would also have to break the barrier between two planes. The difficulty of this task was even more unbelievable than asking his original body to fall in love and give up on revenge. Humph, look at your cowardly look. It's really embarrassing. Lu Shi didn't say anything. He had long been used to being despised by the other. If you still want to see Gu Min, it's not impossible. At that time, Lu Shi was in the most desperate situation of his life. The voice was the last straw that he had to hold on to. What is it? As long as we use the child of providence to destroy the plane's fate, you and I will regain our peak strength. Breaking the barrier of the plane is nothing. Lu Shi frowned. That's a high-level plane with a high-level civilization. Although the level of civilization in the environment where Gu Min lived was still very low, because of the intervention of the child of providence, that plane was directly promoted to a high-level plane. There were thousands of planes in the world, and the high-level plane was the plane with the greatest potential. The barrier of the plane was very strong and extremely difficult to break. As far as I know, the plane we are in now and Gu Min's plane belong to the twin plane. If the two planes were compared to each other, it would be easier to understand the concept of the twin plane. Simply put, that plane had the potential to be promoted to a high-level plane, and now this plane also had the potential to be promoted. If that wasn't the case, why would the child of providence go back and forth? If you can take over this plane, your heart's desire will become a reality. Regardless of whether what the original body said was true or false, Lu Shi could only choose to believe it. Okay, I will start the layout. You can't just bet on one side. The child of providence isn't that easy to fool. You have to be more prepared. I know. Lu Shi looked down. If it's done, you should be able to regain your strength, right? The other said happily. Almost. But before that, I still have to rely on that stupid woman to absorb a small amount of fate. Lu Shi said, when that time comes, we will be two independent entities. Don't think that I will return to my original body. Chapter 1178. From the moment of separation, you and I are two independent entities. I am not your vassal. Lu Shi barely regained his senses. Because of his return to reason, he had to restrain himself from completely falling out with the other party. Perhaps the target of his revenge would not only be the previous ones, but also one more. This is just your personal opinion, a foolish and naive one. Do you think that by possessing a human body and living as a human for decades, you are really a human in your bones? Even if you are willing to be a human, you still have to ask the consciousness of this plane and the patrolling merchant if they are willing to let you go. Gu Min was lucky enough to be expelled, but what about you? Your soul was destroyed and turned into cosmic dust. If you insist on being independent and resist my fusion, neither of us can resist the harm of the outside world. Are you willing to die like this? The voice knew Lu Shi's weakness too well because Lu Shi was the love it had separated. Gu Min and the few human children she had were his weakness. Looking at Lu Shi's useless appearance, it was even more glad that it had separated its love back then. Emotions were indeed a hindrance to it. But no matter how much it despised Lu Shi, it couldn't let him run around outside. It had to find a way to take him back as soon as possible. Lu Shi said coldly, "Do you think I will agree to your request if I know that you killed Ah Min with your own hands? You piece of trash." The voice was silent for a while, then said resentfully, "The patrolling merchant is already in this plane." "That person is already here?" Lu Shi's eyes widened in shock. Why isn't he? The main system hid very well. As a part of it, Lu Shi didn't know the exact location of the other party's hiding place. It was normal that the patrolling merchant couldn't find the main system, but Lu Shi had transformed into a human and lost his special ability, so there was nowhere to hide. The main system was silent for a while, as if there was a problem with the circuit, and the communication wasn't very sensitive. Who knows what these old foxes want to do? You don't have to think that you are lucky. They haven't done anything to you now because you are the father of the Son of Destiny. This identity is connected to the karma of the Son of Destiny. That guy can't do anything to you. No matter what the reason is, he won't let us go. If you want to live, the only way out is to merge with me again and restore your strength. Before it was sliced up and separated from itself, the main system was in a heavily injured state, and its strength could not compare to when it was at its peak. It had spent more than 2,000 years traveling to hundreds of low-level planes, tricking those stupid and greedy women into working for it under the guise of the system and the Goldfinger. In total, it had seized the luck of the dragon veins of more than 200 low-level planes. Unfortunately, it was unknown whether it was because it had done too many immoral things in the previous half of its life or something else, but it was always not favored by the heavenly Tao, and its luck was always a little bad. Every time he regained a certain level of strength, he would always run into a nemesis that could restrain him. It would either be a planar patrolling merchant who happened to travel to that plane, or that disgusting master-disciple couple. He would never admit defeat so easily, if it weren't for the fact that he was cunning enough to make sufficient preparations to escape every time. He wouldn't have been able to cut off his tail to survive every time. He had escaped from death time and time again, and would have been caught and hammered to death long ago. The main system had done some careful calculations. Right now, this plane was a high-level reserve with high potential. It had a majestic destiny. If it could gather the destiny of the Son of Destiny and destroy the foundation of the entire plane, it would be able to absorb enough energy, enough to restore it to its peak state. Unfortunately, its luck was as bad as ever. Just as it was happily slicing up the plane and preparing to play with the Son of Destiny, the few fragrant bodies that were separated from it made it feel like its balls were about to explode. The one that followed the female protagonist, Wang Huiyun, was not bad, and it had transferred a lot of energy to it for more than 20 years. The one that followed Jiang Pengji was simply pretending to be dead. Lu Shi was the most useless, and he was directly seduced by Gu Min. These useless people could not be counted on. Their final value was to return to the main body and strengthen its strength. It had never thought that Lu Shi, the useless person, would still want to be independent. For all, did this useless person still remember the mission he was carrying? For the death of an ordinary human woman, he was still stubborn now. Who gave him face? The main system anxiously wanted to take back the separated fragrant bodies, but Lu Shi refused to cooperate. I refuse. Lu Shi's face was still gloomy, and he did not take the threat of the main system seriously. The main system was so angry that its teeth itched. If it was not for the fact that the patrolling merchant was squatting in this plane, it would not dare to make a big move and expose itself. It would definitely have forcibly recalled the separated fragrant bodies at all costs. Why would it ask Lu Shi's personal opinion from so far away? Why? If I return to the main body, Lu Shi will be gone. For its own safety, the main system never gave too many memories to the fragrant bodies when it was sliced off. It only let them remember their respective missions, and Lu Shi was no exception. Even so, he knew that once he returned to the main body, the main consciousness would be the main system, not him. If that was the case, wouldn't Lu Shi be dead? Lu Shi wanted to reunite with his family, but he did not want to lose his entire family. He had secretly investigated the death of his two legitimate sons and Gu Min for so many years, and all the clues pointed to Wang Huiyan. He had never doubted himself. Now that the truth was out, it would be too stupid for Lu Shi to allow himself to be manipulated by the other party. I cannot absorb you, as long as you help me, the previous promise is still valid. The main system bewitched him. Lu Shi, think about it carefully. You don't want to see the son of fortune take over Lu Shi's body and leave your biological daughter alone, do you? From the perspective of the consciousness of the plane, Lu Shi's body was specially prepared for Jiang Pengji. From the perspective of the parents, Lu Shi was their daughter, and he was the child that Gu Min painstakingly gave birth to after 10 months of pregnancy. Just because of the arrangements of the consciousness of the plane, she had to give up this body. Not to mention Lu Shi, even if it was any other parent, they would not be able to accept such an ending. So what if he was the son of fortune? At the end of the day, he was still an outsider who took over the nest of the magpie. The main system knew very well how to hit Lu Shi's weak spot. And that Lu Zhao, I really don't know if he is smart or stupid. I just casually tricked him, and he gave himself away. The main system laughed. In his eyes, that fake legitimate sister is more trustworthy than you, his biological father. Lu Zhao was so scared that he immediately ran away and sought refuge with Jiang Pengji when he revealed some information misunderstood that the hunter's daughter might be the body that Lu Shi's soul temporarily resided in. It was obvious that this guy was also a person who pretended to be a pig to eat a tiger. He looked like he only knew how to eat, drink, and have fun, but in fact, he was smart and knew some secrets. He and Lu Shi were at odds with each other because Gu Min had left some clues for this guy. Lu Zhao, this pig of a brain, did not think that if he really married the hunter's daughter, what benefits would Lu Shi himself get? Chapter 1179. Shut up. Lu Shi said coldly, let me think about it. We've been planning this for so long. If we give up now, all our efforts will be in vain. The main system was angry. Lu Shi was only a part of it, but now he was talking to the main body in such a tone. Who gave him the courage? Lu Shi frowned impatiently. The more the main system urged him, the more he couldn't trust it. Since Gu Min's death, Lu Shi's heart had died. If it weren't for the main system's promise to let him live, he would have died a long time ago. Now that he knew who his real enemy was, no matter what, he had to drag him into hell and consign him to eternal damnation. I'm worried. You're too cunning. Lu Shi said, tell me where you are and I'll help you. They knew their own situation very well. For advanced creatures like them who were pure spiritual bodies, once they lost their host, they were like snails that had their shells removed, revealing their weakest parts. They were basically at the mercy of others. If he knew where the main system was, he would have the upper hand. We are one. I'm cunning, and you're just as cunning. Turning around and betraying his teammates and killing his acquaintances, I'm used to doing this, and you're not going to lose out to me. If I tell you where I'm hiding, there's no guarantee that you won't turn around and sell me to the Son of Destiny. The main system refused with a smile. It knew that Lu Shi harbored hatred and malice toward it, yet it still told him everything obediently. That was really stupid. Lu Shi sneered, you know me well. That's a very safe place. The main system said proudly, Lu Shi, don't you dare betray me. If you dare to do that, think about your daughter first. Lu Shi's soul is very fragile. If I accidentally cut it into pieces. Lu Shi secretly clenched his fists. The veins on the back of his hands bulged, revealing a frightening green color. After a while, Lu Shi could no longer feel the existence of the main system. The main system was cautious. Even if it talked to Lu Shi, it wouldn't leave any traces. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been able to get away with it for so many years. But, a very safe place? Lu Shi closed his eyes and looked at a random place. The sky was dark, and candles were already lit in the room. The bean-sized light dispelled the darkness in the room. However, the lighting equipment was too crude. Other than the area near the candlelight, the rest of the area was still shrouded in darkness. The darkest place was under the bronze lamp. It's dark under the light? The most dangerous place is the safest. Could it be that it is here? Lu Shi couldn't help but put himself in the shoes of the system. If he were the system itself, where would he hide in order to avoid his natural enemies and the Son of Providence? Lu Shi thought about it carefully. He couldn't come to a definite conclusion, but he roughly sorted out a few suspicious targets. There was only one chance to deal with the system itself. If he couldn't hit the target in one strike, not only would he be in danger, but he would also drag the people around him into danger. This was contrary to Lu Shi's original intention. Compared to the problems Lu Shi was facing now, the previous ones were nothing. In order to retaliate against the system, Lu Shi had to have enough power, but he was only a part of the system. He was still trapped in the human body and had lost his special ability. Rashly clashing with the main body was tantamount to striking a rock with an egg, unless Lu Shi sat in his seat, his cold, black eyes flashing with a complicated light of calculation. Killing with a borrowed knife. The system itself wasn't invincible. There were plenty of people who could deal with it. Didn't it say that the patrolling merchants were in this dimension? As long as they hadn't left, everything would be easy to handle. Of course, with Lu Shi's current identity, running to the merchants would be sending himself to die. But if he didn't do that, there seemed to be no other way. An unseen storm was brewing in Chongzhou. The battle between Jiang Pengji and Su Bei had also reached its climax. What subsystem, what main system? Jiang Pengji knew. Even if she didn't have the god-slaying sword in her hands, the system, which had been sliced up countless times, was destined to be pressed to the floor by her. She swore that she would use the system's petite body to wipe every single tile on the floor until it was clean and shiny. Her line of sight shifted from Chongzhou to the front lines. Jiang Pengji led the main force to attack Su Bei's main force. Qiguan Rang guarded the rear supply line, causing the enemy to return empty-handed several times. To reduce the pressure on the front lines and wait for the rear to stabilize, Qiguan Rang transferred Li Yun to the front lines. Qing Yuan received orders to lead the newly promoted generals and split up their troops to take a detour to Zhe County. They fought on two fronts to exert pressure on Su Bei. The two families fought in full swing. Huang Song occasionally jumped out to assist Su Bei and restrain Jiang Pengji's troops. What made Huang Song and the others' balls hurt the most was that, as the lord, Jiang Pengji often led the troops into battle. Every time this happened, she would always attract a lot of hatred. Unfortunately, her martial arts were strong. She killed her way in and out of the 10,000 troops as if there was no one there. At first, everyone was attracted by her combat prowess. It didn't take long for them to notice the weapon in her hands. People always liked to use the phrase, cutting through iron like mud, to describe divine weapons. In reality, this phrase was exaggerated. Many legendary, divine weapons were illusory. Only the weapon in Jiang Pengji's hands allowed them to see what it meant to cut through iron like mud. It was really cutting through mud. Not to mention one spear and one shield, even if there were more than 10 spears and shields, they couldn't block the opponent's sharp blade. With a swing of the blade, the spear and shield, the man and the horse were all sliced into two with a smooth cut. A real divine weapon. One Lu Shi is already so terrifying. With a divine weapon in her hands, she's like a tiger that has grown wings. Although one person's bravery in battle couldn't affect the outcome of the battle, who asked Jiang Pengji to be the enemy's vassal? The vassal personally entered the battlefield to fight. Every time, she could behead hundreds of people. Wouldn't the soldiers be as excited as if they were on steroids? Every time they fought passively, Su Bei's side was under a lot of pressure. If they didn't make use of the terrain to slightly turn the tables, their situation would be even more difficult. Even if Su Bei intentionally targeted her, Jiang Pengji was slippery. She could still maneuver around the 10,000 troops. Her maneuvering and positioning were incomparably coquettish. They couldn't even hit her, let alone take her head. As a general under Su Bei's command, Xie Zhe naturally couldn't always command. It was common for him to enter the battlefield and encourage the troops' morale. If he wanted to find Jiang Pengji, he had to first go through the line of defense around her, for example, Li Yun. When Xie Zhe first saw Li Yun, he felt that his facial features were familiar. There was a special kindness between his brows. If not for the fact that they were on the battlefield and the two of them weren't on the same page, Xie Zhe really wanted to praise him. What a handsome young general with a friendly temperament. Even so, he still said something. You're really good looking. I feel like I've seen you somewhere before. Li Yun's face darkened. He picked up his silver spear and was about to poke a few holes in Xie Zhe's body. Lecher. Xie Zhe rode his horse and retreated. He instinctively raised the spear in his hand to block. He used his skillful strength to deflect Li Yun's attack. The two of them were about the same age. They both used long spears. Their spear techniques were outstanding. For a moment, they were evenly matched. However, the more they fought, the more apprehensive they became. They hadn't exchanged blows before, but they knew each other's moves the moment they met. They were able to counter each other's moves. Just as he was about to vent his anger, the troops at the back retreated. Xie Zhe could only give up. Chapter 1180. Captain Xie, do you have something on your mind? Xie Zhe seemed to have something on his mind after he came back from the battlefield. His eyebrows were almost twisted into a knot, and he was very worried. Han Yu was sensitive enough to notice this, so he asked quietly. Xie Zhe came back to his senses and subconsciously raised his vigilance. When he realized it was Han Yu who asked him, he finally let go of his guard. Military advisor Han. He didn't want to answer, but since it was Han Yu, he could confide in him. After all, he trusted Han Yu. It's nothing. It's just that the soldier with the silver spear that I met today. I always felt that he looked familiar. More importantly, the spear technique he used seemed to be the unique technique of the Xie family. The spear technique of the Xie family is not taught to outsiders except for the direct male descendants. Han Yu asked, Captain Xie, are you sure that the spear technique that he used is unique to the Xie family? Xie Zhe nodded with certainty. The Xie family was different from other aristocratic families. They were a family of martial arts, and the whole family was full of martial arts. Many of the children in the family had to play with a small wooden spear as soon as they could walk. The foundation of martial arts also started at a young age. They were good at spear techniques and used other weapons very well. When Xie Zhe started practicing martial arts, he was not even as tall as the special wooden spear in his hand. The spear technique of the Xie family had long been integrated into his bones and blood. Even if he was blind, he would be able to recognize Li Yun's moves after 2 moves. It was impossible for him to make a mistake. However, he didn't say it out loud. If Han Yu wasn't trustworthy, he wouldn't have told him. Han Yu said, Lu Shi doesn't have many generals. Apart from her, there is only one other person who is good at using the spear, Li Yun. Li Yun? I've heard of him. Xie Zhe recalled and said, considering his age, appearance, and skills, he should be the one who intercepted me just now. Han Yu continued, Li Yun was born in Fengyi County, Wanzhou, Dongqing. He seemed to be the adopted son of a peasant family. He has nothing to do with the Xie family of Gongning. The two families had nothing to do with each other. Are you sure? Xie Zhe looked confused. if that's the case, why does he know the spear technique of the Xia family and look so familiar? Ever since the incident with eldest uncle Xia Qian, the Xia family had been quiet. The disciples of the Xia family would not leave Yangning County easily. With Li Yun's skills, he would not have been able to master it without diligently practicing for 17 to 18 years. In other words, if there was a disciple of the Xia clan teaching him, then it would definitely be a direct descendant disciple that stayed outside for a long period of time and rarely returned to the clan. Xia Zhe went through all the relatives in his mind, but he couldn't find anyone who fit the criteria. Sigh, if there was no war, perhaps I could go up to him and ask who his teacher is. As a descendant of the Xia clan, he had to ask about it, or else it would be hard to explain to the clan. Han Yu said, maybe there will be a chance in the future. Xia Zhe could only agree absent-mindedly. At the same time, Li Yun looked as if he had just suffered a stroke. He gulped down a large bowl of water, and only then did he manage to suppress the raging fire in his chest. What a lecher! Li Yun said angrily, how could that person be my cousin? Compared to Xia Zhe's confusion, Li Yun knew the relationship between the two. Before he met Xia Zhe, he had a good impression of the Xia clan, but now it was like he had swallowed a fly. Was that Xia Zhe an adorable fool? On the battlefield, knives and swords had no eyes. He dared to tease him. Li Yun regretted not poking holes in his opponent's eyes. No, I think he used his actions to prove the blood relationship between the two of you. Jiang Pengji's eyes were bloodshot and she didn't pay attention to anything else. But she still had the audience in the streaming room. The salted fishes had already told her about what had just happened. She had to admit that if they weren't family, they wouldn't enter the same house. These two were really interesting. Whether it was Xia Zhe's, you look so good, I seem to have seen you somewhere before, or Li Yun's, my lord is such an imposing man, yet you dress up as a woman, I'm not as good as you, they were both naturally adorable. Could it be that this thing was passed down from their ancestors? As they spoke, the military doctor came in with a medical box. General, please take off your clothes and examine your injuries. Jiang Pengji wanted to leave. After all, the group of salted fishes in the streaming room were already salivating for Li Yun to take off his clothes. If she didn't leave, she could guarantee that the group of salted fishes would lick through the screen. As the lord, she had the obligation to protect the integrity of her subordinates. My lord, do you need me to contact him? Li Yun didn't understand Jiang Pengji's pity for him. Instead, he called out to her. Jiang Pengji had no choice but to stop and turn to look at Li Yun. The lad threw his empty water pouch aside and lifted his hand to untie his heavy blood-stained armor, revealing his blood-stained shirt. It looked scary, but most of the blood belonged to someone else. Li Yun had only suffered some superficial wounds. His muscles and bones weren't hurt. Contact Xia Zhe? For what? Jiang Pengji was stunned. Li Yun said, to instigate his rebellion. Just like military advisor Meng Heng and Nye Sun, as he finished speaking, he looked at Jiang Pengji with a gaze full of anticipation. Whatever military advisor Meng Heng could do, he could do it too. Jiang Pengji was speechless. What happened when she wasn't paying attention? Why did Li Yun learn to be evil without a teacher? Your situations are different. You can't be mentioned in the same breath. Moreover, you and Xia Zhe aren't friends. It's true that you are cousins, but Xia Qian has been expelled from the Xia family. It's still a question whether he recognizes you. Xia Zhe is Su Bei's brother-in-law. In terms of relationship, Su Bei is naturally closer. How are you going to instigate his rebellion? Jiang Pengji laughed involuntarily. It's not that I don't believe you. It's just that your temperament is so upright. This kind of work that requires mental and physical energy isn't suitable for you. Don't let yourself be used by others before you can instigate others to rebel. Li Yun frowned. My lord isn't like Su Bei. How can you be so easily deceived? Jiang Pengji laughed involuntarily. Li Yun's main point was really confusing. The idle spectators licked Lian's upper body while feeling resentful that he didn't live up to their expectations. Lo Siji Lianmeng, silly boy, the streamer is mocking you for being simple-minded. Why are you so stubborn? Every time they saw the streamer teasing the little angel Lian, Lian's mother fans and milk powder fans were worried sick. How could Lian not know? However, he knew that his lord had a generous personality. Otherwise, she wouldn't joke around with her subordinates. He could clearly distinguish whether the meaning of her words was malicious mockery or a kind joke. Jiang Pengji laughed. Of course I'm not Su Bei. As they spoke, Jiang Nongqin said that she had something important to discuss with her. What is it? Jiang Pengji asked. Jiang Nongqin's expression was solemn as she said, we don't have enough sutures for the wounded soldiers. We also urgently lack medicine and pure water to treat wounds. During a war, there weren't many soldiers who died on the spot. Most of them died because they couldn't receive medical treatment after the battle. Therefore, the medical logistics was especially important. Once medical treatment was in place, the number of deaths would be greatly reduced. Jiang Pengji had already formed a relatively complete medical logistics team. The death rate had reached new lows. In a sense, the importance of medical logistics was comparable to the importance of military provisions. Nothing has been sent over from Hu County? Jiang Pengji frowned. Jiang Nongqin said, it hasn't been sent over. I'm worried that the transportation line has been disrupted again. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.